Alex will be like this tall, and everybody else is like this.
I'm gonna look like I'm on the team. One of my many skills.
What? You want to tell him? Tell him. That's how he plays.
Who's the real picture?
I know. I don't know.
Which one's the official
Todd.
one?
Todd's got his thumb over the lens.
Todd, are you the official picture?
Todd does everything.
You're so serious.
All right, we good? Thank you, guys.
Congratulations.
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 Hello. Let's go.
Good evening.
Sugar?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the council meeting to order. Mayor Davey,
Here.
Councilmember Laredo,
Here.
Councilmember London,
Here.
Vice Mayor McCormick,
Here.
Councilmember Moss,
Here.
Councilmember Petros, Councilmember Segurola.
Here.
We do have a quorum, and we may please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, Mayor, is brief comments by council.
I had a couple of brief comments. First, I want to thank everybody for our strategic workshop this weekend. Katie, thank you for the idea. Manager, thank you for putting it on. And I want to thank all the employees who came out, who took their Saturday to be with us and to assist. I don't think I say it often enough, but thank you for what you do for this village. I do appreciate how much work you guys put in around this village. We seem to see it as this sort of seamless place, and a lot of people don't realize how much hard work goes on behind the scenes, how much our people are working for the betterment of this community. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who was there, and thank you to everybody who wasn't there. But thanks to our employees. Anybody else?
I wanted to announce that the governor on Friday signed into law a new mandate, I guess, for texting while driving. It's now a primary offense. In addition, construction and school zones are hands-free. I believe the law goes into effect in July, but they'll start writing tickets in January of 2020. I wanted to thank Chief Press, who I know was very vocal on this. And I'd also want to encourage everyone to keep pushing for a full hands-free ban in cars. I think the more I got into this, the more I realized how important that is. It's not just texting. People do a whole lot of other things. It's going to be really difficult for our police officers to pull people over and know that they were actually texting. So please be vocal and be strong, and let's keep moving forward on this issue. And last thing was Debbie Wanenkoff was a pivotal person in this charge. She started last year. She went up for every single committee and subcommittee meeting in Tallahassee, stated her case, was there for the signing of the bill. And I think she was really instrumental in making this change. So thank you to everyone in our community for their efforts.
And thank you for you doing the same. I mean, really, you were our point person, and we appreciate it.
Sure. Next item, Mayor, is approval, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, withdrawals.
Okay, I have two items, and I know we've talked about trying to keep the additions to a minimum, but these two are pressing. One is discussion on the pension board. We have a position that we have to discuss, and the second would be the Presbyterian parking lot.
Great.
Does anybody else?
I don't put things. I like to put in a brief report of my
participation until a few minutes ago in the city of Miami surprise meeting where Ultra raised its ugly head again. And also to discuss on boards that we have a clear definition of duties and responsibilities and procedures.
Anybody else?
Mayor, I have a few items.
Oh, I'm sorry, Manager?
If I may, item 10B, that item was prematurely put on the agenda. It'll be fully cooked and ready to present for the June meeting, so we'd like to pull that entirely from the agenda.
Sorry, which one is that?
Item
That's the one
10,
about
10B,
paddle boards?
Kite
No, the
boarding.
paddle
Kite
boards.
boarding.
Oh, I'm sorry,
the
10B.
kite boarding fees.
Apologies. Oh, okay, all right, so that's fine.
And then under resolutions, item 10C, I would like to move that item to the consent calendar regarding the subaward grant agreements.
Okay,
That's 8E.
The what again? 12?
that's 10C.
10C,
10C, and you're going to move it to 8E.
yes, sir.
All right.
And then
No,
finally,
it's not 8E, 8F. Sorry.
And last, two more things. With regard to the consent calendar, item 8B, based on the feedback I received from the council member briefings, I would like to move that item from consent to resolutions for discussion.
8B?
Okay, so 8B.
8B.
8B is
8B
in
is going to
board.
move to 10.
All right, can
Well,
we just swap
actually,
them out?
Well, it's actually the first item up after we read the consent agenda.
Okay, fine.
And then two clarifications on sponsors. Item 9, A2. The sponsor is actually the village attorney for that ordinance. And then for item 8B, the sponsor is actually Councilmember London. So we just wanted to clarify that.
I'm sorry, say the first one again, I apologize.
The ordinance?
Is London.
No, 8B is London, but what's the first one was?
9A, 1. Oh, 9A2?
2 or 1?
I put 1.
So 9A2,
I
Parks
do.
and Open Space Advisory Board. So
That becomes what?
Attorney.
Village attorney.
Got it. All right,
If I just may go over the
Yeah,
changes
I think
one more
that's fair.
time. 11A11 Pension Board, Mayor Davy. 11A12 Presbyterian Parking Lot, Mayor Davy. 11A13 Ultra, Councilmember Laredo. 11A14 Boards, Duties and Responsibilities, Councilmember Laredo. Item 10B will be pulled from the agenda. Item 10C will be moved to consent as item 8F. And item 8B will be moved from the consent agenda to the resolutions.
Then you have London.
And the sponsors for 9A2 will be changed from village manager to village attorney.
I'm sorry, clarification, Village Council on that.
Village, I apologize. So 9A2, the sponsor will be village council. And 8B will be Councilmember London.
okay.
Sounds good to me.
All
favor?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is public comment.
I have one person signed up, Fernando Romero, please.
Hello, Mayor, members of the council. Fernando Romero, 121 Crandon Boulevard, Unit 457, Key Biscayne. Well, I'm here to just be the spokesperson for the Key Biscayne Water Sports Association, which we started about a year and a half ago, and most of you are familiarized with me and all the members of the Key Biscayne Water Sports Association. The kiteboarding season is almost over, and we are hoping for some feedback from Chief Press and from Chief Lang about how things have gone. I think regulation has played an important role in doing things safely and keeping things at bay. So now what I would like to do is just be the spokesperson for the Water Sports Association and read a statement. On behalf of the Key Biscayne Water Sports Association, we would like to express our disapproval and opposition to the proposed paddleboard license to Paddle LLC. Just a note, I just met the people from Paddle LLC, and they are fantastic people. And as you will see, what we want is to have a chance to work with them to make this safer. Now, having said that, I'll continue with my comments. Not too long ago, as you know, the village of Key Biscayne imposed regulations for kite surfing in the village beach. Among other things, we're now required proof of proficiency in kite surfing, payment of liability insurance for each individual kite surfer, which comes at an average of $50 per year, and an annual fee of $250, which is now in the process of being reduced. Thank you so much. All of that after the city determined a new location away from the Commodore Club building beachfront. The new location is a smaller stretch of sand, but we have kept it very safe, I believe, this year. Basically, spending $300 a year to kite in a beach with public access, without receiving any amenities or beach support is what we've been doing. No one has offered a marshal, so we've been policing ourselves. And we still think that having a marshal is a really good idea, especially now with proposals involving paddleboards. Now the city of Key Biscayne, the village of Key Biscayne is proposing to give a free commercial license to a for-profit private organization, which will use the village beach to rent paddleboards in line bike style. Two issues come to mind. Citizens pay to use the village beach, while for-profit organizations use it for free. The second concern, and to me the most important, is safety. Untrained, unsupervised citizens and tourists using paddleboards on the beach where no one is supervising the renters, no one is making sure that the renters are using life vests per the U.S. Coast Guard requirements, whether they will use the ingress and egress point that we have created at Sonesta, or will they use the entire beach? Who makes sure that they don't go on an offshore wind day? At Crandon Park, for example, paddleboards are restricted to days with onshore winds below 12 knots. Allowing someone to practice paddleboarding in offshore wind conditions and winds over 12 knots is very, very dangerous. What about hours of operation? Should we be concerned that one night our children on the beach will try something crazy and get on the water without lights? If the city approves this license, we believe that this is a double standard. Again, charge a premium for citizens and residents and taxpayers to access the beach, to launch and land a kite, and give the beach for free to a for-profit private organization that will create incredible higher risks than any kite could ever have. And lastly, I just want to say that we are available to discuss safer alternatives to this proposal, and we encourage the Key Biscayne Village Council to accept open bids for a manned concession with a full-time marshal to enforce rules and regulations. And lastly, we wish that there was something like a water sports committee that would steer these things, because we believe that water sports are here to stay in the village of Key Biscayne. Demographics have changed considerably. We have a lot of kids practicing water sports, and we'd rather have them practice water sports than playing video games.
Right.
Thank you.
Fernando. Okay, an omission on my part to additions was special presentation. We all got a photo op with the soccer team, and we forgot to have the special presentation for the soccer team, so I think we need to add that to special presentations, if that's okay with everybody. Any objections? Okay.
Are they still?
That's a question, so I understand. He said something about, first of all, did you actually say thank you to the council?
Yes.
Oh, I just saw not used to it. I didn't know. I'm surprised.
All right, thank you.
Smart ass.
Okay. Next.
Next item is board appointments, board reports by council.
Okay, two boards we had vacancies, and so I'm going to put these forward. I'll start with the Parks and Open Space Board. There were 2 vacancies. There was also, well, technically there are 3 vacancies because there were 1, 2, 3, 4 people on. Aileen Nicholson has been there but has not been a member. I'm going to put her forward as another board member. And then I would also like to put Claudine Cotto and Nancy Davis forward as also board members. I've spoken to all of them. They're all interested in being board members. They are all, very, very excited to be a part of it. I happen to know all 3, so I know their involvement in the village, and I think they'll be excellent choices for this board. So I would ask for ratification of those 3 individuals.
So moved.
All those in favor, sorry.
Just real quick, I would like, when we do this, to also state the other people that were interested and to encourage them to come to meetings because,
Certainly. Yeah, you're right.
because
I
we
should-
have more interest in
Right.
the boards than we have spaces for. And I think the
We
point
did. We had a
being that
number
there's.
of people who, Fernando Romero, Santiago Bergonzi, Frank Kaplan, and Yvette Fernandez.
board was this?
This was for the Parks and Open Space Board. So we did have a number, it's a nice time to be appointing people to boards because we have more people than we have spaces. And we feel fortunate. Thank you for the involvement. Stay involved. Because look, spaces open up over time and go to the meetings, be involved. Just because you're not on the committee or on the board doesn't mean you can't participate in what goes on there. We want people to feel included and to feel engaged and to be a part of what goes on.
I second Ed London's motion.
There was 3 names that you had there?
Yes, Aileen Nicholson,
Aline, Nancy,
Nancy Davis, and Claudine Cotto.
Claudine Cotto. Okay.
Can I just add also, when you attend those meetings before you are actually appointed, then when a spot opens up, and if you do get appointed, you are ready to be off and running. I did that before. I was appointed to EAB, and it was really helpful. So, good idea, Katie.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I have, okay, so I'm going to be here for a while giving out the list of applicants for the Village Beautification Board. The 5 people that I'm recommending, are we going to vote on each or just all of them together?
There's actually no need to vote as long as there's no objections. then-
Okay, all right.
Because there are 5 only?
No,
Oh.
no,
Has to be confirmed by council. Was that
As
confirmed?
long, as consensus, but no.
Oh, okay.
okay, all right.
The 3 previous appointments, they were approved, right?
Those 3 appointments.
Right, now we're going to the
Now we're going
beautification,
to the Village Beautification Board.
which is 5, yeah.
And again, there were 19 people submitted for this one. Yeah, so this was not easy.
There's 7? There's
There's
only 7?
5, there's only 5 spots.
There's already 2 on there.
There's 5 spots. Well, no, there was nobody on it. This is a whole new board.
it's
This
only
is a
5
whole
people
new
on the
board. So, Armando Nunez,
Right.
Gina Coleman, Eric Rodenberg, Anna Grieven, and Ceci Sanchez. So,
It's, I'm a little tired, but isn't Gina on the Art and Public Places?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. Is she on Art and Public Places?
Yes, I'm pretty sure she is. Gina Coleman.
What is our rule?
Well,
on that
I,
then? I apologize.
No,
I was trying to get continuity and she
No, I
did
know.
on the prior one, so that's,
but, I tried to quantify under ordinance, and I voted after all the work we did, that it's so important, and I applaud you appointing on the previous 3 people who are new, who are fresh, so this great pool of talent. For example, the 4 incumbents on the parks and open spaces, some of them have been since 2010, which is great because they're quality people, but the principle is wrong. The people are great, but the principle is wrong. And so bringing somebody like Nancy and the others in is fresh. And I really, truly believe that we should not have people serving in 2 committees when there's so much other talent. There are some committees that have, or different committees that have husband and wives. So if you count it as families, it's we need to open up the little process. People get elected. I got elected. 4 of us got elected, and I don't believe in quotas, but the people who are elected for us also look to have a natural and healthy refreshment of talent. And I think it's hard in a small community to say no to people, but I think we ought to strive. And I have nothing against any of the people who are in two boards, but I don't believe it's a good practice. Particularly, in this case, you have 19 applicants. I submitted one who has been very active. But I mean, if we keep appointing the same people in two committees, then we're never going to have any fresh.
Okay. All right. So you would object. So your objection is, and not objection to Gina, but
just a
you would
reflection.
prefer to have Gina. Okay. So the other four, can I leave the other four, and then I'll go back. I'll come back next meeting with the fifth, if that's okay.
So basically, we're saying that you only serve one committee, correct?
We're trying to shoot for that.
And it's
More people have an opportunity to serve.
And I understand it. I think that's fine.
when possible, like in this case.
In this
if there
case,
are
I
more
agree.
people willing to do it.
All right.
Can you give me the full
And it's
name?
not about
again?
any individual, it's about.
Ceci Sanchez,
Agreed.
Eric Rodenberg.
So now we're
that's
going,
true. Ceci Sanchez, Armando Nunez, Eric Rodenberg, and Anna Grieven.
The only one I
and to-
object to is Ceci.
Yeah.
no, I
Good
would
luck
second
getting
that.
out
I
of
would
here.
second that.
Okay, so to the vice mayor's point, would it be acceptable for me to go to Gina Coleman and ask her which board she wants to remain on?
That's another.
Okay, so I'll do that. So subject to that, can we just approve? And then if she so chooses not to be on this, as opposed to Arts and Public Places, I will come back with another name. I'm coming back with a name either for Art and Public Places or for the beautification.
Understood.
Okay?
Got it.
Understood.
And then finally, and I apologize, I don't have a list of all the applicants. Dante Sensi is the name for the Education Advisory Board. He was the last one, and we had a list last time, and I believe he was on that list. He was provided to me from a current member. I spoke to him. I've known Dante for a while, kids in the school. He's been very involved in the PTA.
So I move it.
Okay, so I think he's a good choice.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Mayor, under special presentations, the soccer team.
Jackie, are you gonna, Todd?
Where are they?
I know they all left. I don't want Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to hear. Let's tell everybody.
Oh, it's such a nice surprise. Thank you so much. And thank you, Todd, for your team and all the collaboration. I was just texting Katie that some of the boys that took the photograph have been playing with Key Biscayne Soccer Club since they were 4 years old. So I got a little teary-eyed. But they're U18. Most of them, actually, this is their last year. They're going to college, some of them to play soccer. I'll do a press release with a summation of the big success, but we actually took the team all the way to state finals. So the entire state of Florida, they came in second. Very close game, like 1-0. Anyway, but thank you so much for your support and all the amazing things that, which makes our community so unique and embraces our youth.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for everything you do for soccer, Jackie.
Okay.
Next item, Mayor, is presentation regarding composting.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I would like to introduce to you the Zero Waste Culture, that is a non-for-profit organization that the board have approached the Presbyterian School Director, Ann Roth, to partner with this. And they have worked tirelessly to develop, select the site, and trying to come up with the proper procedures and trying to partnership with the school and hopefully the village. So I will leave the directors to do the presentation, in which Elena Iturralde is the president. Of course, Jackie Schultz is the director, and Taima Herbas also is a director. So I'm going to leave it to them to do the presentation. I'm just put them all them together, and I hope that we can do a great partnership. Thank you. So, where is this? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. I hate to do these presentations, but, but this is so important.
I'm sorry, please state your name.
Oh, sorry, Elena Iturralde.
Thank you.
A Zero Waste Culture is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to educate individuals and communities and engage them in programs to help mitigate climate change, promote entrepreneurship and self-sufficiency. Well, we are already here. Jackie Kellogg and Taima Hervas, myself. Our story is on January 10. I organized a Key Biscayne educational visit to the waste management facility to learn what happened to our recycling. And what we saw was that almost nothing is recycled. And we were determined to take immediate action to try towards a positive change. 4 months later, we are here and proud to announce that a Zero Waste Culture is born, with answering the question of what can we do to help save our planet. We knew that we had to help transform consumers into environmental activists, and the best way would be through step-by-step, hands-on, community-wide partnerships, programs, and pop-ups. And we did some research to see what was going to be our first project, and we learned that 1/4 of our global warming produced by human is due to methane gas, and that solid waste ends up in landfills, and with the absence of oxygen, produces methane gas. And half of this solid waste produced is organic and biodegradable. So we concluded that one easy and collaborative way to fight against climate change would be to turn our food waste into rich soil. So we asked our neighbors what their opinion was, and we conducted a survey in February, March, and this is a survey. We learned that over 90% of Key Biscayne residents, from the people we asked, who responded would like a community compost on Key Biscayne. Even 98% said that they would follow the proper guidelines for composting, and half of the respondents would like to buy nutrient soil. This is one of the questions from the survey. Everything was done in English and Spanish, so not to leave anybody out. And this is just an example of a question. So you see that there was 61 persons that answered, only 5 skipped, and it was really 90% of those people wanted to do a compost, even if they had they had compost at their houses. So we started conversations with strategic allies, and they have here Anne Roth from the Key Biscayne Presbyterian School, who has agreed to locate the site for the first compost station in the school as part of their educational program and commitment to the community. Come here. And also, Back to Earth, a 501c3 whose mission is to stop organic waste from reaching landfills. They install and operate compost stations throughout Miami-Dade County. This is going to be the 4th station they install totally. And we will coordinate and manage and oversee all partnerships. This is a photo where the station will be put on at the Presbyterian School here near the parking. This is a look, the front, what will you look, and this is how the compost works in 3 compartments. And that's just an example how food scraps can turn into rich soil, which is so much needed in Key Biscayne. And this is only the way how it works. So every resident will receive one of these buckets. They just have to fill the buckets with the food scraps and empty the bucket in the compost station. Just take it back home, clean it, and fill it up again. So really, we We have, this is our partners, Back to Earth Key Biscayne Presbyterian School. And we have taken the, how do you say? The step, yeah, to add Village of Key Biscayne because we really want you as a partner. And Key Biscayne will become a model for other towns to follow. So this is what it is.
How large was the station, the composting station?
How large? It's 16 feet by 8 feet.
Okay.
What do you think? How much do you think it can handle in terms of waste?
Well, this is, I don't really know exactly how much would it.
I know you need a lot of, I don't know a lot about compost. I know you need a bit of room for composting to be succccessful. I was just curious.
I mean, this is a station they have in Coconut Grove and
Okay.
South Miami.
Okay.
So it depends on how people would, how many people would have.
Okay.
So, and they empty it once a week, and if you want them to empty it more times, they will come and get it.
Do they make smaller ones for people who want to put them in their house and have them actually in the backyard or anything
Yeah,
like that?
they can do it, but it's, I mean, yeah, they can do it.
But that's not their sort of mission. Their mission is to create community compost.
Right. And what do you need from us?
They're university students from FIU, so they created this 501c3.
Will be a startup, maybe we need a larger location if eventually this become really community oriented. However, what we think that we will need is that you will commit and we will prepare a budget, because there is certain investment that have to be on this. So as a partnership, we don't want to go through all these vendors and to allocate more expenses and anything else. So if you will consider this to be a partnership for them to come back and provide you or the manager with a proposal and numbers.
I would like to see a proposal, certainly. I mean, I'm in favor of a proposal and coming back for budget season.
I think the idea is excellent. Do you have, two thoughts I have is that hopefully it's incredibly successful, though I think we would have trouble finding a larger space than what you've already figured out, and I would probably want to think about that
Well,
before.
I've been bringing up a discussion item that I've been putting
With
it off and
Virginia
putting
Key.
off with Virginia Key, so that's still
It'll
a
dovetail in there.
possibility. Yeah, I think it would dovetail nicely if we have to go for a bigger space. I think that's a real possibility. They used to have composting on Virginia Key. It was a pilot program. I've spoken to Ken Russell because it's his district. It is something they would be interested in working with us on. And I think, I think it's very viable. I think it's an important next step for the community if we really want to start being leaders in this sort of work. So I would like this, let's see how this goes. To my mind, I'd like to see how this goes and then see how we can work with the City of Miami to do something even larger for yard waste, for the restaurants with their food waste, because it actually potentially becomes a cost benefit to the businesses.
Yeah, very much.
And so there's a real, in terms of economics, there's a possibility this becomes, I don't want to say a moneymaker, but it's something where
It sustains itself.
It sustains itself. And that's what I'd like to see us moving toward.
I would say, I think maybe a couple years ago, I recommended perhaps like Calusa Park, right actually behind the Golden Hog, like on the other side of the fence. There's various ways to compost, a lot of different ways, not just the boxes. You can also compost meat and cheese too. If you can find areas like down by the Bill Bag State Park that you can dig a little bit deeper holes. They also have restaurants back there who aren't doing anything with composting. And then the big benefit really is all of your community's homeowners, for example, would then in turn collect compost so that they could use for their own homes. A lot of people are talking about growing fruit and vegetable gardens, and so it would be basically free soil.
Right. No, I think that, that's why I like it. So, yeah, please, can you get something for us in, when's our budget workshop?
June 18th.
June 18th.
You said that, what are the two communities that already have it? Coconut Grove?
Coconut Grove?
In South Miami?
I can give you the
In
address.
South Miami?
Yes,
Do you have any idea what budget they presented to those communities and what kind of funding they needed? No, okay.
From what I understand, they have a lot, and then it's kind of a co-op lot that everyone in the community is using until somebody purchases it, and then I have to find another lot. So this is, the way people are doing things around the world. If you have a lot that's empty, it's just, you can put it to work.
Right.
So.
What do you need the money for besides the buckets?
What do you mean, sorry?
You have a budget, you need money. Besides buying buckets, what do you need money for?
To build the station,
Thank you.
to clean the land and to build the station.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
So
much.
most of it is, upfront cost.
Yeah,
And then maintenance cost would be
partners, yeah.
lower, or
Lower.
maybe we'd have people involved who wanted to help.
Exactly.
Yeah, that could almost be part of a couple of different projects.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you in June.
Next item, Mayor, is the consent agenda, inclusive of item 10B.
Do you have to read it, or can I just move it?
I apologize, inclusive of
Exclusive.
inclusive of item 10C.
See.
Oh.
Can I move the whole consent agenda?
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Rolling.
Next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving a revocable license agreement with Paddle LLC for a paddle board sharing program, providing for authorization and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you.
This is what was 8B.
Yes.
This would have been 8B.
Okay.
It's tab 2.
This is,
Go ahead.
Okay, discussion. Ed, why don't you take off?
this is a proposal brought forward by gentlemen, want to come forward? Two young Key Biscayne gentlemen, entrepreneurs, creative guys, came forward with this idea. Paddleboarding has been presented to you before, and basically, this is a non-exclusive license. Anybody else wants to do the same thing, they can come before us and do it also. We're not going to make any money out of this. I hope they make any money, but I don't think it's going to be a big money maker. I think basically they're going to do it as a service because they love the sport. If they break even, I think they're going to do great. I don't think they're going to retire on this thing here. They're all enthusiastic. They're providing the equipment. They're providing everything. We're providing nothing other than the land to use. You heard some comments about how dangerous it was and all the kinds of comments. I beg to differ. I think most people would beg to differ. The difference between kiteboarding and paddleboarding is the difference between day and night. So having said that, gentlemen, you want to say anything?
Yes, I have a statement. First off, good afternoon, and thank you for having us again. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. I have to give thanks also to Todd, Andrea, and Chad. They've been extremely helpful throughout this whole process. It's been a learning process for us.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is Andres Avello, and my address is 650 Ocean Drive, apartment 3B. And paddleboarding is already one of the most fun and safe water sports that promotes a healthy, active lifestyle. But we've taken it many steps further by offloading the rental process onto a mobile application and by providing automated hours of operation so we can coincide with the parks that we operate in. So there are restrictions between being able to go out at day and night. We will prevent that. We've also added safety equipment onto the racks. So all the racks will provide life jackets. We also have GPS and cellular tracking on each device. We know exactly where everybody is at all times. And we have a 24/7 support contract with CETO. Should anyone fall outside the parameters of what is deemable as safe, they will be picked up by CETO and brought back. We sought out to create a modern, fun, and safe experience for our community to enjoy the island's resources, and the best way we were able to do that was through paddle. When we began conversations with the village last October's council meeting, we wanted to provide a similar service to the existing vendor, which was Lime at the time, and we were recommended to follow Lime's agreement, which did not have a share. But we're not a multi-billion-dollar group here. We do not have unlimited reach, but we are locals who believe we should invest in the Key in any way that we can, and the way that we can do that is by providing paddle to the Key. To further outline, we're providing a new, fun, safe, and healthy amenity to the village at no cost. We're making a significant investment in this project for the village in its entirety for a non-exclusive trial period, which can be canceled in up to 7 days' notice. At the end of the day, this is a trial period. We will be listening to everybody's feedback to further improve paddle and make this something beneficial, fun, and safe, and ultimately impactful for the community. If this is a successful operation, and once the trial period does end, and the contract is up for review, we will happily review, and hopefully this is a very successful thing for us and for the village as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the most
Sorry,
important,
excuse me, no, you can be next.
yeah, sorry.
Councilmember Moss?
Just had a couple of questions. You will be paying business taxes, is correct?
Correct.
And your company will have insurance as well.
Correct.
I was trying to understand the connection between the kiteboarding and this issue. I really had a hard time because the way I look at this is that this is an equipment rental. They're basically renting out equipment for people to use. I mean, I don't see why if anybody's renting out a bike, do they need to monitor the people who are renting the bikes to make sure that they're wearing the helmets and things like that, or how does that goes to the responsibility of the user? So I'm guessing this is very similar to renting out a bicycle. You're renting out a paddle board, right?
So it is a very similar situation, but ultimately the liability and everything does fall on us. So to prevent that, and prevent really anybody from having any issues, we are actively monitoring 24/7 where our equipment is. As was previously stated, there are certain scenarios where it's going to be too windy, and we'll shut the stations down on those days.
Okay, and then the real issue with the kiteboarding is their fee, and I think that's a separate issue that we definitely need to look at closer. I think that might be coming back in another meeting. But I see this as a good thing for the community. I agree with Councilmember London. I don't know how much money is really going to make. I don't know how many paddle boards are you guys?
So we're starting small. We're starting with 4 and
4 paddle boards.
4 paddle boards. That's
Okay.
it. And this is simply a trial period.
And it's a trial period. And where are the paddle boards stored?
They're stored on the rack. So there's a rack that on the rack is the rack
see
itself
this,
is connected and charged.
Yeah.
It charges the boards and the batteries within the boards, which power the GPS and the cellular chips inside of it.
Okay, and the rack is located on the beach park, correct?
Correct. So the boards will always be returned to the rack. The renter is charged until the board is returned to the rack.
Okay, I just want to make sure because it was also, and my point is that it was made out that this is like a Lime bike situation where paddle boards are going to be all over the beaches and you're just swiping. This is a thing that you have to bring it back.
I would say
And
it's
that's
more
a
like
lot
city bike.
different. Yeah, that's a lot different than what we were looking at. So, okay, that's it. I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Councilmember Laredo?
No, I commend young entrepreneurs, particularly when they were born and raised in Key Biscayne, and they are taking the chances. We shouldn't be worried about whether they make money or not. It's well run. And to highlight again, because this is a community full of misinformation, one of my pet projects, that Ed London, said this is a non-exclusive agreement, a trial period, so that people understand that we're not doing anything to favor anybody other than the judge. So I commend you, and I second the motion for approval.
Councilmember Councilmember Segurola?
I have a couple of concerns, different topics. First, regarding the agreement that's been attached, and I discussed this with the manager, there's a couple of things that I think need to be cleaned up a little bit. With regard to Section 2, the term, the term is a little internally conflictive in the agreement because it's for 1 year, cancelable 30 days prior, or by letter of 7 days. It sort of conflicts in how it works. I understand the spirit behind it, but I think legally that needs to be cleaned up a little bit.
Okay.
With Section 10, liability, 10.2 specifically, it says that paddle will indemnify and hold harmless the village. The section below that, insurance, requires that the village be added as a named insured on the insurance. I would like to see in 10.2 that paddle shall indemnify, hold harmless, and defend the village.
Okay.
Just to not have any gray areas that if someone is sued, I'm sure as a named insured, the village would be defended by whatever insurance company, but just to not have any gray area, if you add and defend, it means we will be defended. We don't have to reimburse anyone.
Of course.
And going back to Councilmember Moss's statement, if no one, and this sort of concerns me, if the rules are that you have to wear a life jacket or a helmet or whatever, if no one's monitoring it, and the village can be sued if someone goes out without it, and I say this as a personal injury lawyer, if no one's monitoring it, but those are the rules, and you allow people to go out, the village can be sued.
So, may I add a comment to that? So, under our waivers and our terms and conditions, the users have to abide by everything, and I know everything about that, but the reality is that Lime was never forcing anybody to wear helmets.
Right. I'm with you. I completely agree.
We do have signage on each board showing that a life jacket is necessary. Remember your life jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Where we have 2 places on each board that are showing you, take your life jacket.
Mm-hmm.
We're telling you how to hold your paddle, how to stand on this properly, how to properly navigate. Don't start off going downwind so you don't get caught downwind and can't paddle upwind. There's various things that we've worked with the Stand Up Paddle Industry Association to really make this as clean as possible and really put out a product that is comparable to something that Lime Bike had put out and was a huge success.
I understand. That's one of the reasons why I wanted the and defend language included in the agreement, just to clear that up. I have a few concerns outside of the agreement. First of all, I want you guys to know, I wish you the best. I hope this works out. You know, it's great that you guys are locals and you're building this up. But I can't ignore some of the objections that have been brought up, and I'll explain my basis for that.
Mm-hmm.
First, we have the issue of the vessel exclusion zone that before I was on council, I was involved with the discussions with the kiteboarding. A paddle board is a vessel according to the Coast Guard. And when we were dealing with the kiteboarders, we required them to create a channel to which exit the vessel exclusion zone. If we don't have a similar requirement in this situation, we may be having a double standard. That concerns me, number one. Number two, although I wish you the best, I am concerned that by allowing you to use public property for a for-profit business without charging any sort of fee, we may be creating the wrong precedent. The village may be seen as we're not business incubators. I have a problem with that because I'm not saying we should charge a lot of rent. I'm not saying we should charge a lot of fees, but if we allow Paddle to set up and use village property to rent equipment and make a profit, in the future, someone else is going to come with the same request. That's a problem. How are we going to say no? The kiteboarding situation is different because the kiteboarding was not a for-profit business. Kiteboarding are users that pay a license or a user fee, and they go out. I'm not concerned about there being this being a no-bid contract because, as you stated, it is not exclusive. Someone else can come and set up shop. But the problem is, what if someone else comes and say, hey, I want to have a manned post renting paddle boards, but I'm new too, so don't charge me. That creates a problem because then the village will be down the road of that precedent. I don't think, I'm open to suggestion for what could or should be charged, whether it is some sort of rent or some sort of fee sharing or something of the sort, but I would not, I'm having a problem getting over that hurdle. Lime Bike is the precedent that we allowed them to come to Key Biscayne and rent their wares rent-free. At the moment, I'll be honest, at the time, I didn't really have an objection to it. I thought it was a great idea, but now thinking back on it and hearing the objections that have been presented, I think that was problematic, and I don't want to continue going down that road. So those are my concerns.
Katie, I'm sorry, Councilmember Petros.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I am also very appreciative of the idea, and I support you in your success. I am very sensitive to the kiteboarding issue because I was one of the ones very involved in trying to find a compromise and a solution. And I hear them. And so I did want to know what your plan was on how to deal with our vessel exclusion zone, and if you understood it, and what you would need to do to monitor it. So if
Yes.
you could tell me your plan on that, that would be helpful.
Definitely. So in the application, when you first log in, you're going to go to the station. The first thing that is going to show up is going to be the terminology telling you that how to navigate past the vessel exclusion zone, behind the barrier, and then you can paddle beyond that.
And
Also,
how, and what
on
does it
each
say?
rack-
What does it say, just so I know?
Sorry, I'm opening the app really quickly. So as soon as you select it, it says, location notice, non-motorized vessels operated by individual village residents may navigate from and to beach along a path perpendicular to the shoreline for the sole purpose of directly traversing through the vessel exclusion zone. This exception does not permit navigation through the vessel exclusion zone for any other purpose or in any other direction. Now, we will also have a map showing exactly what that is. So because we're in one location, we can show you a line going perpendicular and an area where you may paddle and an area where you may not. On the terms of the legality of it, a paddleboard is actually considered a flotation device when it's in a swim area by the Coast Guard. And it's only considered a vessel when it's outside of that swim area. We've worked closely with Chad on trying to figure this out. And the best way to comply with the village laws are to inform, and show them in the app and show them physically as they approach the station, where they can and where they cannot go.
And how do you monitor them and make sure they actually do what you've told them they need to do?
We can track their routes. We can see exactly where people are paddling and where they are. We have GPS locations on all the boards. Now, chances are that we're going to see a point in the GPS, and we can't tell if they're actually going northward at that given point in time because it's a specific point. But through multiple points, you'll be able to figure that out. We can have a periodic review and see if users are actually going, if they're not going. But to say that we're actively sitting and watching if they're going to be going in this zone specifically, we don't have a plan for that. We can implement one if that is something that you'd wish.
Is that our responsibility, though, to enforce?
Currently, I know that paddleboarders don't know about that law or rule, and they do paddleboard within that zone.
Did you know?
If they are doing that and you notice that on your device, what is your plan for correcting it?
We can notify them, and if they're repeat offenders of that, we can ban them.
Last question, how do you lock them so that they can't be used after dark, and what hours are you proposing to have this offered?
So we want to follow the hours of the beach park itself, which is sunrise to sunset. Those are the hours of operation. We'll lock that. It's done programmatically by saying start time, end time. And every board in that station at end time will disappear. You cannot select it to unlock it. The way that it unlocks and locks is when the user goes up to the station itself, you'll open the location on the app and you see a list of boards that are available. If it's outside of the hours, those boards won't be there. But when you select the board, you'll process the credit card. It'll connect through Bluetooth onto the device. It'll unlock it, and then you can use it. That's when the rental begins. When you return it, you have to return the board onto the lock. You select end rental, and until that rental ends, the user's being charged. So it's in the best interest for everybody to return the board.
Okay.
Vice Mayor? You're next.
So my first question is, when you have these sort of educational items, is it just something they see, or do they have to actually click a box acknowledging that they saw it on the app?
For the terms, conditions, U.S. Coast Guard laws and regulations, and also for all waivers and liabilities, they have to physically click in and accept it.
But the things like the perpendicular to the shore and...
That is something that would be unique to here, so we don't have it set up where you have to physically accept it, but it is shown multiple times. So it will be shown as you're selecting the station. It's the first thing that will appear. And then secondary, it will be, we're planning to put a physical sign saying this is where you can and can't paddle.
Okay. And then the one other thing that I thought of, once this is wildly successful and profitable and you're on beaches all over the country, I'd love to see if it's possible to make this thing solar powered.
So we do have solar power options available. The one that we've tested over the last year and a half is solar powered. Now, it doesn't work with solar at the beach park because it's completely covered by palm trees.
Okay. Then my next thing, to Councilmember Segarola's concerns. I've heard many of the same things, and I think we're clearly already down the road of allowing some things to operate without us charging them fees, Line Bike, for example, and certainly in their inaugural periods, including even the vendors on the Village Green and kiteboarders. Not that I think kiteboarders is the same, but all of those things operated for some time before they started paying fees. For me, what makes me look at this and say, how do I justify it for an inaugural year? I think of it more as us offering a service in partnership with them. We have lots of residents who live in apartments that don't have room for paddle boards but would like to be able to participate in the sport. And it's us offering another amenity like we did and how we justified it for Line Bike. I don't know if that makes you feel any better, but that's my thinking on that. And I would like to say that at the end of the year, I would like to come back to relook at this and see if maybe there is some way to look at if there's profits, if there's some kind of a profit share or something that we could work out. And I don't know if we need to add language to leave that door open for us for a renewal or if that's just automatically there, but that is important to me because I think we're going to see these on beaches all over the place.
Thank you.
Councilmember London.
Answering Ignacio's thing about free, we have other free things that we've been doing. And usually there's small items. There's a jewelry person who's been here forever and ever and ever, and she doesn't pay anything, and she's been running the classes and doing the jewelry thing. There's a few other things, and these are mainly small operations where any payment probably would make them not even worth doing. The fact that we're going to do this on a trial basis, like you say, after a year you come back and hopefully the Wildly's successful, we'll charge them 99% of whatever they get, and they'll be happy to do us because they're happy to be here. So I think we can do that. So it's only a trial. It's a great idea. It cost us nothing. It's another benefit for all the members and residents and citizens of Key Biscayne. And these guys have put a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, came up with a lot of great ideas, investing a lot of money. So I really think we should go ahead and approve this thing and let them start.
Thank you.
Councilmember Moss, real quick.
I just want to respond to Councilmember Segarola also because I was involved in the Lime Bike as well to get the shared bicycles here. And when we were looking at the shared bicycle program, it would have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars because we would have to build the infrastructure for these companies to come. Lime Bike was actually a win-win situation for us because they wanted to test out their system. It had no cost to us. And I think this is another type of service that we can test out without any cost to us because we could provide the service if we wanted to. But it's a cost that we would have to start putting together and somebody have to operate this, and it's just cost over cost. When you have somebody here saying, hey, we can provide that service for you, we won't charge you. A lot of these services actually we get charged for. So for me, it's a win-win situation. I would look at these case-by-case basis and not say this is setting a precedent, but we have to look at each case and see how it's benefit to us as well benefit to the people.
Freebie is the other item that basically we pay to have them.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
Just one other question. In the event of a hurricane, what's the
So
plan?
we would remove all of the boards. The stand itself has withstood 70 knot plus winds, and it's also the reason why we bolted down to the floor. It has a semi-permanent installation. Obviously, we'll cover any costs associated with that for implementation and removal as well.
Sorry. Okay. Councilmember Petros, Councilmember Segarola, and then I'm going to make one comment, and then we'll move on.
One other thing I just wanted to state that Chad explained to me, the difference between kiteboarders and their ability to get through this exclusion zone and the paddleboarding is that kiteboarders can't do a direct perpendicular traverse outside of our vessel exclusion zone, while a paddleboard can. And so that's why we've set up this channel, so they can actually basically zigzag and go through it, and they are body dragging through the water with a kite that is powered by the wind. So there is a distinction between these two things. I think it's important to note. I also would like to have a trial period on this, because I think, given the controversy about activities on our water, I think it's important that we come back, that we know we're coming back to see how successful this is and how well you're able to monitor people, because we don't want to create a safety issue. And so that would be my main point.
Councilmember Segurola, last point. Councilmember Segurola. Sorry.
I understand the spirit of it, and I'm not against it. I understand what you said. But a question. This agreement, and correct me if I'm wrong, right now the proposal is to have a rack with 4 paddle boards. This agreement, the way it's written, all power to you, let's say it's a booming success. What if, how do more paddle boards get added? And what's the limit? And what happens if they want to put 20 paddle boards? There's no, and you start, I didn't see it.
Currently, I think we're capped at 10.
Where is that? I don't recall seeing it. I'm not saying it's not there, I'm just saying.
I definitely remember reading.
In section 7.5, it says that paddle shall have no more than 4 deployed paddle boards available for use in the village at any given time. Paddle shall not reduce or increase the amount of paddle boards
Without the
without the express written consent of the manager and her designee. So, I mean, we can clean that up if you want to make it, a little more clear. But and if you want to put a cap on it too, we could do that.
It should be discretionary.
Whatever you
shall
want.
have no more than 4. What's your concern?
Being deployed, that was, I understood that to be 4 in the water.
Well, something that would comfort you is we can't physically install an additional station without permits.
We control it.
I would clean that up just to not a year from now have 40 paddle boards out there.
Well,
if there's 40 paddle boards, I'll cancel it in 7 days and then start charging. That'd be great.
Well, I would like to have changes to this agreement that make it more restrictive right now.
Yeah.
So if we could come to an agreement on that.
On what?
On the number of paddle boards and how long this agreement's in place as a trial, not with an automatic renewal. And
Can we just
that
say
we,
to take out the automatic renewal then?
Yeah.
yes,
Okay, wait, hold on.
for me.
I get to talk every once in a while. I'm in favor of this trial period. I mean, I understand. I have no problem with taking away the automatic, and if it makes you happy I was comfortable 4 paddle boards. I understand what you're saying. If you've got 4 deploy, I mean, we'll do that. I have no problem with that. Let's move it forward. I do understand, to your point, I get that kiteboarders are a little frustrated with how tough it was for them to get what they got. And I am, we're going to be watching because of the policing. I mean, the kiteboarders have had to police themselves heavily. And I think one of the concerns is, look, there are knuckleheads in the world. That's, and they will do stupid things. People will do dumber things than you will ever believe possible. So I am concerned, but I like that you've got all the GPS on board. You've got CTO engaged. So I feel like you're covering as many possible eventualities as you can. So I'm in favor of this. I'd like to see it come forward. I'd like to see it come back with those 2 changes. With those 2 amendments, I'd like to approve it now.
Which 2?
That, limit to 4 not deployed, but 4 paddle boards available for use, period. You don't just take out the word deployed.
And defend us.
And defend, the word defend, and also the automatic, it's a 1-year period, and you have to come back for renewal the first year.
Move.
Those are all minor changes that we can accomplish.
That's what I'm saying, but let's call the question.
Move.
Call the question.
Well, it's already been moved and seconded, I believe.
With the amendments? The amendments have been
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'll second the amendments.
Okay.
Sorry, I held it up.
Oh, no, it's all right.
To vote on the amendments first, and then we vote on the main thing.
Well, why don't we just vote on the resolution as amended, the contract as amended?
Yeah.
As amended, All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, thanks,
Motion
guys.
carries.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all your help and support.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
We trust you. We trust you.
All right, next.
Next item, Mayor,
We go back to ordinances?
ordinances, yes, first reading. An ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, granting to Florida Power and Light Company its successors and assigns a non-exclusive electric franchise imposing provisions and conditions relating thereto, providing for monthly payment of a franchise fee to the village, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Thank you.
Anyone?
Would you like me to
Manager?
introduce?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So we do have a representative from FPL here to field any questions, but basically I can walk you through what this is. So there is a franchise agreement in place currently with Miami-Dade County and FP&L where the county FPL charges a 6% of the gross revenues to the ratepayers in the region net. So there's a deduction for the taxes that are paid in that region as well as fees. And then there's an effective rate that ranges between 3 and 3.5%. And that revenue comes to the village in the form of general fund revenues. That agreement with the county is coming to the end of a 30-year term next year. And the village has an opportunity to enter into an agreement directly with Florida Power and Light to have our own franchise agreement. A few noteworthy changes from the agreement with the county to what we have before you. We can charge up to 6%, and there are no deductions for taxes or fees paid. The rate can be modified annually up to one time a year by resolution. Under the current agreement, the village receives one lump sum payment with a true up at the end of the year, so it makes it a bit difficult for budgeting purposes and forecasting. Under the new agreement, the village would be receiving a monthly revenue stream. There's one open issue that I had a chance to discuss with each of you in your briefings with regard to the final payment between FPL and the county, and then the county passes through the payment to us. And perhaps we can get an update on that. But my understanding is that there may be a gap in the remittance to the village from the time when the other agreement with the county expires and when the village enters into our own agreement. Thankfully, the village is in a healthy place from a cash flow perspective, so we're not too concerned about that. But that is one open issue that I believe we could get clarification on tonight, perhaps? Yes, okay. Yes. So that's it in a nutshell. We can field any questions and
Can we talk about that? Could you present on that, the payment issue? Because it's all about the dollars.
Good morning, council. Good evening, council. It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
Good evening, council members. My name is Armando Fernandez, Florida Power and Light. My address is 4200 West Flagler, Miami, Florida, 33134. So the issue I believe the manager is discussing is the franchise with the county runs through May of 2020. So the effective date of the franchise with the village would start on June 1st of next year, of 2020. And then there would be a 3 months sort of collecting. So on September, we would pay the collections for June. So I believe what the manager is speaking to is that for fiscal year 1920, there would be a shortfall. Internally, I know that this issue has been brought up by several of the municipalities that are now signing their own franchise. So, we're looking at it internally to see how we could address that issue. So it's still an open issue with FPL. We're looking at it to see how we could work with the village.
I move to pass.
What's that? Second.
The alternative, of course, is to be our own electric company.
Is that a motion?
No, I mean, it's something to consider, but basically, you know, when I say be your electric company, what happens is that a lot of these small electric companies, I guess Homestead's electric company?
Bureau
They
has their
own.
own.
Yes,
Homestead
yes,
Electric Company.
yes, they're a
They buy the
municipal.
electricity from FPNL, but they own the transmission lines within the thing and they run it as a business.
I was kidding.
I mean, so that's the other alternative.
Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I was about to say, Ed, go on.
suggestion.
You have an
Or we
opinion
I
on
didn't say we
everything
should do
else?
it. I'm just telling
Solar
you,
run
that's
completely
one of the
off the
alternatives
grid,
you have to
our
consider.
own system.
It's
We
a
have a
London
motion.
Electric Company.
Sounds good.
We can be all solar-powered electric.
Is there any discussion, or I mean, is there anybody
Make that
concerns,
transformer
anything
thing.
else?
I mean, basically,
Battery
you
house.
Let's
Call the
move it.
question.
All right, we have a motion on the floor?
I second
A
it.
question, please. So this won't take effect until 2020.
Correct.
We're approving it today, but nothing's going to happen until next year.
Correct.
Why are we doing it now then?
It was at the request of the village.
Yeah, so sometimes these agreements take a while to negotiate, so many of the cities have been negotiating and working on these for years, so.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right, thank you. So from a planning and budgetary perspective, we need to know going into next year if there are going to be revenues that we can count on and incorporate into the budget.
The only reason I'm thinking about that is because basically, since you're doing such a great job putting us at the top of the list with the new law passed for the undergrounding, how could
Thank
this
you.
possibly affect us with undergrounding going forward? And that's why I mentioned, you know, electric company, everything else. So these are the kind of things that I don't know that we should do it today until the Public Service Commission goes ahead and decides how they're going to approve changes in the rate base for them doing undergrounding and how we could possibly do undergrounding. So I think, you know, great having new franchise, but I don't think now's the time to do it. That's all. I mean, you'll do it 3 months from now, 4 months from now, no problem, right?
We could come back whenever the council's
But I mean,
ready.
there's no rush is what I'm trying to say.
No.
Okay. So I would say, why don't we wait and see how it is and see, possibly there might be some advantage, who knows, depending on going forward what we do. That's all.
Are you
Nothing
okay?
to lose and all to gain.
If I
Mayor?
may,
Oh, sorry. No,
if I may, I mean, the franchise, respectfully, council member, the franchise has nothing to do with undergrounding.
Exactly.
No, the point being is, when I mentioned being an electric company, obviously I had in mind the idea how that might affect us since we not be FPNL, what we could possibly do and how it would affect us rate-wise, et cetera. So we might want to create, quote, an electric company in regards to undergrounding, depending on what happens with the Public Service Commission. We might be an electric company for a year or two. Then we might decide, you know what, you're a better guy, we give it back to you.
Would we essentially be a reseller in that regard?
Basically, yeah, of course, we're not going to generate
No,
electricity. or do
I'm
anything
asking the
else.
question, that's
I'm
what you're
just
talking
saying,
about.
I'm not saying we're going to do this.
I know,
All
I'm
I'm
just, I'm
saying
asking a
is there
question.
might be some legal thing or some business idea that we might be able to use, which might affect us getting undergrounding and getting it quicker. That's all.
Vice Mayor?
It might be cheaper. Who knows?
So I understand that with the county not renewing, or you're not renewing with them, you're
Correct.
going to all these other municipalities like us and sort of negotiating directly with them. Is there anyone who hasn't done it?
Well, all of the 9 cities are in different stages. And Monica, I know the Cutler Bay has approved theirs. Aventura has approved theirs. Pinecrest, first reading? Second reading. Sunny Isles, first reading. I think, obviously, the village is at first reading. Miami Lakes just approved first reading last week. So they're all in different stages.
But no one has said no thank you.
No, no one has said no, thank you.
Chad, real quick question to Councilmember London's point. What are the potential negative ramifications of not proceeding today?
Well, not proceeding today?
Yes.
There is none. I think the only thing I think the village manager will tell you is that she's going into the budget season and she's forecasting these revenues going forward, I think, but she can speak to that. But legally, no, we have time.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Segurola, then Councilmember Laredo.
That's not, excuse me, that's not this year, it's the following year. It doesn't affect this year's budget.
That's actually my question. To the manager, when is it that you need to know the revenues to calculate the budget?
So ideally, going into the June workshop, I would like to have an idea of where we would stand with this. The first budget hearing, both budget hearings are in September, so no later than September. And I think from a timing wise, we need 2 readings, so we figured we'd bring it now in the event, and then a second reading for June. We don't have the meeting in July, so in the event there was a hiccup, it would give us that last month in August to have something in place.
So you need it in 2019 as opposed to 2020?
So in September of this year is when we adopt the budget moving into next year. So using round numbers, let's say that there's $1 million generated. I guess my question back to the council for consideration would be, if you weren't interested in moving forward on this now, what services would we want to not consider for that funding, or what other revenue would we use to?
Let me just clarify, because I think I understand the confusion that maybe Councilmember London has. The agreement expires next year. However, FPNL's last payment under the existing agreement is going to be received by the village in August of this year. The village is not going to get another payment under the existing agreement next year. So it's not like, so our last payment is this year. So from a budgetary perspective, going into next fiscal year, we're going to have no payments unless we enter into this new agreement.
Excuse me,
No,
maybe I
Councilmember
missed.
Laredo, I'm sorry, Councilmember Laredo, and then you.
No, I understand Ed's desire to try to get the most, but having had a little bit of experience, having been a public utility commissioner, the whole purpose of it is that we have a monopoly. And it's a little naive to think that we are going to create a municipal power company. And I think that this is standard, and I also know that there has been tough negotiations by the manager, and reminding ourselves as well of our planning retreat, that we need to, have discipline and management. And so she needs it for her to follow the guidelines that we set out on Saturday. I think it's important to get her involved. I can guarantee you, I don't guarantee anything, that in 3 months it's not going to be any different. It's simply there isn't a competitive market. That is why they're regulated, because they're a monopoly. So if you want your lights to work, I think we ought to move with this forward.
Councilmember London, one more time.
Maybe I misunderstood, but listening, you said that the first payment wouldn't be till September of the following year of 2020. Is that correct?
Correct.
So therefore, it won't affect the budget year. And like you say, we're in good cash position. So basically, it's not going to make any difference during that year as far as cash flow goes. Is that correct?
We could manage, I think, from a cash flow perspective.
saying,
I think that the timing now, and perhaps Mr. Wallace can chime in and help me out on the bridge. I do think we can manage from a cash flow perspective, but even if we get the revenues at the end of the fiscal year, I will have the revenues within that booking period.
I'm not against this thing. All I'm saying is that if it's not necessary to do it today, I mean, you can budget it and soon we're going to do it. And if something comes up with the Public Service Commission, which somehow gives some kind of edge and the undergrounding of doing, I'm not saying anything's going to happen, but I'm saying, why should we do it? It doesn't serve us any purpose to do it today. We can do it in November. We can do it in October. What's the difference?
I think it would be a bit disingenuous to budget revenues off an agreement if it's not executed.
Okay, fine.
That's a fair point. Mr. Wallace?
I don't.
If there are any questions.
I don't have any questions. This is standard procedure that nothing, I wish I could agree with you, but there's nothing's going to happen in the PSC that was going to change the fundamental basis of the monopoly of FPNL. And I know that we got a pretty good deal from the negotiations. And this sort of,
Vice Mayor McCormick?
I just wanted to say that I did have little pause about this, that not because I thought that we would necessarily be our own electric company, but my hope was that maybe in the next 30 years, things would change and there are other people in the game, or maybe we do move to being like that town in Germany that someone sent around, maybe it was me, the article about that went completely off the grid. And I'd love to see Key Biscayne do that, to capture wind and solar. But the way that we do that, the way we do anything, 30 years is probably about enough time for us to get there, so.
Vice Mayor, the agreement is non-exclusive. Right. So if in the
Yes.
future, anyone would come in,
Except not us.
you could generate your own power and for your own buildings, absolutely.
For our own buildings, but not for the rest of our municipality.
Not to resell, correct.
Can we have Chris give us his insight?
Chris Wallace, Interim Finance Officer for the village. Good evening. I don't think what I'm about to say should affect what you're talking about regarding whether or not to adopt a franchise agreement. I think it's a good franchise agreement. I think it allows you to collect what you want to collect within parameters and change that every year. The one issue that is outstanding, and it's more of an esoteric accounting problem, is number one, you don't have to worry about your cash flows. I think they will be largely uninterrupted. But apparently, and this is still up for debate, but apparently when this original agreement was adopted with Miami-Dade County, they were paid in advance. Now keep in mind, these franchise fees are levied against the customer once they consume electricity. Customer consumes the electricity, they get billed for the electricity, they pay for the bill, and those are the 3 months, 4 months that you're talking about in the delay of remittance. From an accounting point of view, that revenue is earned when the customer consumes the electricity because that's when it's taxed. So this gets into a concept called accrual accounting. It also gets into deferred revenues or deferred inflows, meaning 30 years ago when the county was paid in advance from July to July or whenever the period was, their fiscal year also is October 1st. So if they were paid in July in advance, they really would have only had that revenue that they were paid in for July was really, prepaid. So some of that revenue wasn't earned. And as long as this thing went into eternity, it probably wasn't going to be a problem. But now the contract is being terminated, and the money that you're getting in August is really from power consumption from May through next May. So you really, that's the revenue, and three months of that or 4 months of that is actually revenue for this year, and then the rest of it's revenue for next year. I will work all that out for you, but it's kind of something that I think all the finance departments, in fact, that's what's happened. No one's really booked it, in my opinion, the way they should have booked it from the get-go, and now you're going to have to kind of deal with that. It's not going to be a problem. I don't think you should lose any sleep over it. It's a timing issue more than anything. And we may even have to deal with it on the books this year. I don't know. But I think the deal as it's before you, notwithstanding whether you want to consume your own electricity, bill it, however, the franchise agreement, as you see before you, I think is a good deal for you if that's the way you want to go. What I just said should have no bearing on it at all. And I'm sorry I even kind of brought it up. But you should know.
Thank you, sir. My only, this is a first reading, so I'll be voting for it just to move it along. But I am gonna, I think Councilmember London brings up some valid points, and I'll look at them going forward in the second reading. So, but let's call the question.
Councilmember Segurola?
Yes.
Mayor Davey?
Yes.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London?
No.
Vice Mayor McCormick?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Petros?
Yes. Yes.
The ordinance is adopted on first reading. The second reading will be on June 11, 2019. Next item on first reading is an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Amending Chapter 2.
By the way, thank you for your call the other day.
Oh.
I appreciate you reaching out.
You're very
Just
welcome.
to be clear, we had an outage on the Key, I think Sunday, right before Game of Thrones, which threw a lot of people into a tizzy.
That's a crisis.
And so I contacted
That's a
Irene White, and then Mr. Fernandez was kind enough to contact me on Monday to talk about what had gone on. So I do appreciate the responsiveness. So thank you.
Thank you.
Irene White.
No, what part of the island?
Well, at least our part of the island, and a bunch of people texted me saying, hey.
And if I may, very quick to the Vice Mayor. Vice Mayor, if it makes, I wanted to also give you the information that actually FPL recently announced our 30 by 30 initiative, which is to build 30 million additional panels and solar by 2030, which will make us a global leader in in solar production. And we're also building the world's largest battery storage project, which is 4 times larger than any battery in the world. So our projects in sustainability are highly regarded amongst, all utilities in the United States.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you. An ordinance on first reading of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Chapter 2, Article 19, Land Acquisition Committee, to rename the board the Parks and Open Space Advisory Board and update the board's jurisdiction, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Somebody move it.
Second. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to discuss a few changes if it's possible.
I'm going to open it up for public comments first.
Oh.
Anybody here want to speak to this ordinance? I'm going to close public comments. Okay.
On
Councilmember Laredo?
item, well, I didn't know that changing a name would require 2 ordinances, but anyway, we got to get our bureaucracy a little lighter. I see the jurisdiction issue under page 2. I want to make sure that it's clear and delete the words "the village manager," as it reports to the village council. And the issue that it shall be solely advisory, I would like to have some plain English words that there is no authority to any of the members individually or as a group to approach any property owner or in any way, directly or indirectly and unintentionally, creating the perception that the city is buying, the village is buying. It's happened in the past, all the best.
I'm sorry, which section are you talking about?
It starts on the top, A.
A?
Right, so the lead village manager, and I would make clear that they have no authority. In the first sentence, it said, the jurisdiction shall be solely advisory, but I think I like more clear language about the no authority to contact property owners that may be misinterpreted, as it has in the past.
Would you want to submit something to the attorney, just so we can get clarity, what you're looking for included?
Yeah, if you like the idea, there's been, unfortunately, we've seen it, as we try, good people trying to do good things, make mistakes, and sometimes the property owners, have their objectives, and we create unintentionally the idea, oh, the village is looking to buy it, and all of a sudden the prices go up.
So what would you shall have, be solely advisory and shall have no authority to enter into any agreement?
Or even contacts with property owners.
Well, let me think about that. I mean, I understand what you're
You know
saying.
the feeling, I can work with the word.
Yeah, my concern would be no contact with property owners. Well, then how is anybody on the board going to know if a property is available for sale to bring it to us? Because if we're the ones who then have to go out and contact that property owner, I think we're setting up a mechanism that could be a little more.
I agree with you. I had a hard time trying to come up with wording, but I wanted, in fact, I've said it, I was going to put it for discussion later on because it happens on the committee. Maybe we can work together on it. If you get the sense of what I'm going, I don't want to impede, but there's been. Well,
we need to strike a balance.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think we understand that, and if you can find a way
right.
to do it.
Get some for second reading.
I'm happy to work with Councilmember Laredo.
Okay.
Perfect.
And then B, 1 and 2, I think they're kind of redundant. I don't know what it lends. I like shorter. I would move to remove those 2. I don't see what it lends to it. Makes it a little more tight.
You'd want a review of the village's plans and reports relating to land acquisition, and then examination of short and long-term financing options?
I mean, I don't think that they should be in the business of telling us or finding out about financing. That's a little more than I thought was.
My only thought on this, and I understand, my only thought is they may, rather than, again, it's sort of, if they don't know where we are in terms of debt, there's no point in them going forward, because that's all I'm thinking. Because
No, but that would be internal with us. But I guess they certainly can access the manager and find out about our debt. But I like ordinances that are narrow and very precise. So whenever you broaden a thing, people of goodwill with a lot of talent, all of a sudden we have a shadow government. And it creates inefficiencies and it creates confusion with no intention. So I like to just tighten those things up a little bit.
What about the idea of combining 1 and 2 and shortening it, where it would say, review of the village's plans and reports relating to land acquisition, including examination of short and long-term financing options, and that's it, not including our debt or anything like that, so that they could come up with some creative ideas potentially to come back to us?
That's fine.
Would that work?
That's fine with me. I'm just trying to get the principle out if you agree with me, because it's a tough subject to talk about.
Yeah.
And that's why, to me, the words no authority is a very clear English. The other kind of soft words are not as clear as, they have no authority. But we'll work on the rest. Other than that, it's fine.
Once this board is in place and I'm the liaison, I would like to come back and give a first report, and I think there will be a lot of discussion of how to strike this balance so that there aren't problems. But I think the language should coincide with that. So I completely agree with what you're saying. I don't think anyone else up here objects.
Okay.
And if we can, Chad, if you could make notes on that and then work with him to come up with something that seems right.
I'm ready to vote then, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can I ask one, just for order? If we pass this tonight, can they actually meet before we do the second ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
If not, I was going to kill him. No, I told him.
It's an existing board, you're just changing the name.
Existing.
Okay. All right.
I think we should be killing people, but.
Mayor Davy?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, roll call.
Oh, yes.
Mayor Davy?
Yes.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London? Vice Mayor McCormick?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Petros?
Yes.
And Councilmember Segurola?
Yes.
The ordinance as amended is adopted on first reading, and the second reading will take place on June 11th, 2019. The next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving a settlement between the village and John C. Gilbert, providing for authorization and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you. Just before anybody talks, I just want to reiterate to the council that we are still in an active litigation. This matter is not resolved until we have a final order of judgment. So I just want to keep everybody to bear that in mind when we're discussing things up here on the dais.
I have a question with the attorney, if I may. In pursuing our stated clear goals in our meetings and clearly on the strategy session on Saturday that we need to do better communications, I wonder if the attorney can explain briefly for the audience that is here and who is listening to us what this executive sessions mean exactly.
Good evening. Good evening, Matthew Mandel. Executive sessions are basically a shade session. It's an exemption under, a temporary exemption under Chapter 286 when a local government is in the midst of litigation. It allows the attorney to speak with the council on a limited amount of subjects as it relates to the litigation. Court reporter keeps a record of the executive session, and it can only be disclosed after the conclusion of litigation.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because very unfortunately, in this world of disinformation that we're living in, there was basically, in layman's terms, as your representative protecting your taxpayers' money, those sessions are in place so that we can make harder negotiating postures than if we meet all the time in public and the party that is adverse to us would know all our strategy. That's sort of what laymen would understand. It is geared to not only be effective, but also to save your hard-earned taxpayers' money. Because to my dismay, and I try to do some history, there was a leak in I don't know whether to call it a journal or journalism or not about this issue coming today. And certainly the implication I got from reading it, and I read it a lot of times to make sure I wasn't biased, was this is like some sort of secret thing that was happening. And I was particularly dismayed that that would happen. As I understand, and somebody correct me, I've asked the attorney, I think has been here 15 years, if he had ever seen a previous matter that went before executive session, that before, okay, and by the way, everything, like the attorney said in legal language, everything is public once we make this public meeting, that this has ever happened before. And the answer I got, that it's never happened before. Unless somebody else tells me otherwise. I know that I asked Chad, he says, I've been here 15 years and it's never happened before. So I don't get discouraged, but I get disappointed. I don't get discouraged, but it seems to me that we're breaking a tradition. There's supposed to be, the other media that was here before respected this thing. I said, that's now, we've explained it. And the innuendos that we're doing something behind people's back, I think is not something that I appreciate. And it's particularly troubling because somebody that is involved in this so-called newspaper sat on this dais for over 8 years. So it seems to me that there's something wrong here, and I will, as you know me by now, I will stand up for these things before. And it's a very unfortunate, and it lends nothing. It's not constructive, and it creates, again, another issue of contention, division, and et cetera. That's why I thank that gentleman earlier today for actually coming up and saying thank you. So I wanted to get that on the record for us as a group, at least for me, that is why we were in executive session and nothing else.
Michael, thank you. Does anybody?
I do.
Councilmember Petros and then Councilmember Levin.
Let me see the notes on that.
Okay. This issue that is before us was brought to my attention shortly after I took office at the end of 2017. I have studied, read, and received input from many people over the last 2.5 years trying to come to a fair, unbiased, and reasonable conclusion regarding this issue. This is no reflection on John Gilbert as a person or his performance as our manager. The village has no obligation to pay any additional money, nor has it or the pension board acted inappropriately regarding John Gilbert's earned pension benefits. Here's my analysis and the facts to back up this statement. Our pension plan is a defined benefit plan, not a defined contribution plan. The money the village contributes annually is for the collective good of the plan based on the obligations that it has at the time and the ones it expects to have in the future. The specific money that would be guaranteed to any individual participant is only the money that they put into the plan over the course of their work history plus interest, or they can opt to have a 10-year certain monthly payout if they choose that option upon retirement. The real benefit of this plan is that it guarantees a specific monthly amount to each participant once they are eligible to receive it based on a formula of their salary and the number of years that they have worked. There is no accrual of these payments, and the only thing that can happen that can be accrued is you get higher monthly payments that occur over the years with the formula. John Gilbert was eligible to retire and receive this monthly pension at the time he became our manager. Instead of doing that, he applied for and actively sought the job of village manager. He signed a contract with the village that gave him an agreed-upon salary with benefits that included a contribution to a defined contribution plan where the village gave 12% of his salary every year from the village. In this contract, it clearly stated that he would not be receiving the retirement benefit of the pension until he left village employment. He also wrote a letter to the pension board stating that that monthly benefit will be postponed to a later date, which would be determined by when he retired from the village as our manager. The village paid the full obligation of this contract, and he started receiving his full monthly pension benefit upon retirement from the village. Our pension plan only provides one mechanism to set aside money for an employee who is still working in our fire or police department. It is a drop program. John did not elect to go into that drop program, nor did he elect to receive a 10-year certain benefit when he did retire. He chose a straight monthly allowance for as long as he lives. I would like to clarify 4 statements that I have heard or seen written on this issue over the last few years. Number 1, there's a perception the village took John's money for their own benefit. For the reasons I stated above, you can see why this is incorrect. John made a choice about his retirement plan given the options available to him when he decided he wanted to be the manager. The village and the pension board accepted that choice. Number two, I've heard when John appeared before the pension board on more than one occasion that they, the board, asked the council to create an ordinance so they could pay John money out of our pension fund. This is also false. The pension board informed John they could not pay him money out of the fund based on the rules of the pension, and that the only way it would be possible would be if John brought an ordinance before the village council and asked the council to make this change. John never brought that before us. I've heard the pension board did not fulfill their fiduciary duty by not holding John's money in a separate account. This is also untrue. In fact, they would have been violating this responsibility if they had. This action would have violated the rules of our federal Internal Revenue Code, and it would have jeopardized the tax-exempt status of this plan. Their duty was and is to the plan and the collective good of everyone who's relying on this plan to give them their anticipated and earned benefits under the guidelines and restrictions that are clearly stated. The last one is that we've reached a tentative agreement on settlement terms to pay John money because we're concerned we'll lose in court and the village will have to pay John's attorney's fees. I can assure you this isn't the reason for this settlement, and I think everyone else up here could say the same. And John could very well be responsible for our attorney's fees if this case were to go to trial and the village prevailed. In conclusion, I would just like to say it's dangerous to start thinking about the money that the village contributes into the pension plan as money obligated to any individual participant. It's calculated annually to determine expected needs to meet an obligation, but it's not a guaranteed sum to an individual. That's what a defined contribution plan gives. That's where the village has no control over that money, but also no responsibility to make up the difference when it's gone or invested poorly or there is a downturn in the market. With our pension, the village bears the full burden of all those things, the investment decisions, the market fluctuations, false assumptions, etc. It guarantees a monthly benefit regardless of the lifespan of the individual, including if they live past the expected life. It is to the benefit of the village and the plan participants that we adhere to and uphold the rules of the pension as they exist. I don't want the outcome of this case to jeopardize this in any way. There is often a desire to compromise when two sides are in disagreement. That is dangerous in this situation. I hope each of us will think about this as we cast our final vote on this matter.
Thank you for your opinion. Anybody else? Councilmember London?
I was the chairman of the pension board when this came to pass, and basically everything Katie has said is correct. And Katie is going to give a workshop on pensions. She's now the expert because everything you said is 100% correct. And basically, obviously, John has his interpretation of what he expected, and we have the document which we think, not being lawyers, we think that it's not what he expected, and that's why we have a lawsuit. And in a lawsuit, you never know. Even though we should win, it goes to a jury. You know, we're the mean, bad village, and he was the nice, good employee, and you never know what's going to happen. So I look at it as a business decision, nothing question or right or wrong. There is a settlement or a proposed settlement on the table of $325,000. This is against his claim of 700 or I can't remember what it was, 770, 760, 7 something. So it's about 40%, 45% of what he thinks he would have gotten if in fact he did get it without signing that document. There's another thing which took place, which is that he wasn't really legally entitled to it because until the age of 62, you couldn't have an in-service distribution. So basically, he would have only gotten $300 and some thousand based on the year of 62. But all that is really, to me, meaningless. The point is, what's the best for the village today? And today, the insurance company will pay the $325. It won't cost us anything. And if we don't do this, and we do go to court, there's a very good chance anything above the $325 or even the $325, the insurance company is not obligated to pay. So financially, looking at the village's things, I don't think, forget about right and wrong, forget should we or shouldn't we, win or lose, it's a chance we would take for no benefit, only a potential loss for the village. So because of that, not because I believe he is right, but because it's in the best financial interest of the village to accept this settlement and move on.
Thank you for your opinion.
Before I make a comment specifically, would you be kind enough for the public to read?
Respectfully, I can't read those notes. Those were discussed specifically in executive session, so under 286.
So can I make reference to them?
I can't.
I'm asking you specifically, can I make reference to it?
I cannot, under the statute, because it was
You
something.
cannot.
Can you?
Yes. I received.
Things that were discussed at executive session, Councilman Laredo, I advised that they not be discussed until the final resolution of the case has been entered by the court.
Suffice it to say that some of that discussions, this 7 people here who represent the taxpayers, we have a lot of differences, and sometimes we get a little loud and disrespectful, but I have this thing that anybody who attacks any one of them attacks me. And so I just have that on my DNA, and I found those reports offensive. They were personal to at least one member of this council, and very threatening, childish, and bullish. And I want to get it. I wish the attorney was here because I'd love to tell him in his face. And I wish the petitioner was here because I wish I could tell him on his face. I always speak in your face. And I thought that was irrespective of whether you can read it or not. I thought that was, and it has not affected at all my judgment on this case. But I thought it's unbecoming, and it's actually very reflective of the kind of behavior that we got to stop, this threatening and bullying. I hate bullying in school, on streets, or lawyers. The case, as she has quite brilliantly summarized, to the point that even Ed London agrees you're 100% right. I second 100%. And this case, let me tell you what this case is not about. This case is not about Mr. Gilbert. This case is about the law. It's about the facts. It's about playing by the rules. And it's about habeas corpus, which means if you're an adult, you make decisions, and you know the consequences. It's easy. I know the plain way to putting it, this request is, I want to have my cake, i.e. be village manager, very well compensated, his whole career here, and I want to eat it too. Well, my job is to make sure that the taxpayers I represent don't pay for the cake. And the notion in 2019 in the United States of America that, quote, the insurance pays for it, come on. There's no free lunch. Eventually will come back to us either through premiums or something else. The concept that either legal fees or a settlement are, quote, covered by insurance that doesn't cost our taxpayers nothing it's ridiculous. Second of all, and most important, is this creates a tremendously dangerous precedent. It just opens up a door for a lot of other abuses. And third and lastly, I am convinced in what I did, since I was not involved with Mr. Gilbert. I was not, I'm sure he's a wonderful gentleman. He was to me the few times I met him. I didn't serve with him. I have brought to this case a clear mind, not clouded by emotions. I read everything I could on it, and it's very defensible case. And a lot of good lawyers, including ours, can defend it. And I think it's a bad precedent and a bad settlement. And I'm more prepared to stand before our taxpayers and voters, having spent $1 million defending this and paying $325,000 today. So I am very much against this. And second, the analysis that Councilwoman Petros submitted on this case. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the time.
Thank you for your opinion. Anybody else? Okay, let's call the question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Just to clarify, that would be Councilmember Laredo and Councilmember Petros, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, approving a First Amendment to the agreement for address verification services between the Village of Key Biscayne and the School Board of Miami-Dade County, Florida, providing for implementation and providing for an effective date.
Second.
Thank you.
Anyone have questions on this? The address verification.
The what?
Address verification at Mast Academy.
Oh, no.
We're discussing it?
Yeah.
I'm completely against it. I don't think we should spend $1 to do the Board of Education's job. Makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever.
Would you like to hear how we came to it the first time?
Because they didn't do their job, probably.
No, I mean, do you want to hear or no?
Sure.
So that was the feeling that the village had, and they were doing their job, and they were doing their job the exact same way they do it at every other school that has an address verification necessity. However, with the resources that they have, that what they were doing, we felt to be inadequate. We went to them and asked if there was some way we could partner with them. Our first ask was a hope that we could use our local knowledge, not our dollars. However, with privacy concerns, because it's children, we weren't able to get any information about people. We couldn't do that. So the first ask was a $70,000 full-time employee, which we quickly said no to. The second was this temporary part-time employee. And so we did it. It was a one-year deal, renewable twice, because the feeling was this wasn't something that should have to go on forever, but rather that it was important enough to the village and to the residents that this be dealt with swiftly and firmly initially while this program was just in its infancy to protect our investment. So, I mean, I don't need to change your mind, but that's the explanation of how we got there.
Question. Could we pass an ordinance in the village having a large fine for anybody in the village who uses an address here, who doesn't live here to go to school?
I have to ask Chad.
No. No, I mean, that's not something that we can enforce by ordinance.
I'm sorry?
That's not something that I believe that we can enforce by ordinance. This stems from our agreement with the school board. The school board controls the enrollment and who attends. And we're given this right to have a certain amount of our own residents attend the school because of our agreement. But it's not something that I think that we can adopt by ordinance.
Well, the fact that we are contributing, we have contributed to the mass, so we have, I would say, we have some standing in that thing, wouldn't we? Rather than just a normal school. It's not like we had nothing to do with MAST. We contributed lots of dollars to MAST. So because we did that, we have a vested interest, don't we? Of some sort?
I agree, and that's why I believe that we're doing this, that's why this agreement is in place. But I don't think that the proper mechanism to try to enforce that interest is by ordinance through a code compliance and fines and all that.
Well, why not?
I don't think that that's, first of all, when we find someone, we usually then, they proceed to a hearing, and then we lien their property. That's the teeth of our ordinance. Here, I think that you're looking to find people that don't live here.
So my question is, assuming they have no property, we can't lien property, can't we get a judgment which goes for 20 years?
You could go after them in their personal assets, if you will, but it's usually not done given the size of the fine.
Well, it depends what you size the fine, how big you make it.
But back to the general premise, I don't think that the village doesn't control enrollment. The village, by agreement with the school district, and our agreement says with them that they control enrollment, and we're abiding by their rules and policies on enrollment. I don't think that's the proper mechanism now. Maybe we could renegotiate our agreement with them and try to have stronger teeth is a better.
I mean, have a $10,000 fine, for somebody enrolling in a school, in our school, where we're paying for it, and they're not a taxpayer in the village of Key Biscayne.
And I get your point, but let's be clear. We did this for the benefit of our residents.
That's why I'm saying this. That's what I'm
the
saying.
problem is you have to go through, you worked in the school district, you know the cumbersome nature and the chaos, right? So we were able to actually, I mean, Allison, Vice Mayor McCormick, and a group of people were actually able to get this done so that we could actually start removing people who don't belong. But we need to work through the school district. Without the school district input and
I'm
use.
agreeing with you. The question is, can we basically, as you say, make an agreement with the school district, okay?
That's what we've
So
done.
we put a fine in, so, basically of $10,000 or some significant number for people who do this. We find out. That's
And how are we, if if we are, okay, they're outside the Village of Key Biscayne, right? So what you're talking about somebody who's claiming to rent here.
Claiming to be a Village of Key Biscayne
Okay, they're
person.
claiming to rent here and they don't even, right? So if they claim to rent here and don't even, how are you going to attach assets of theirs?
You're not going to attach assets, you get a judgment.
So we're going to go all the way through to get a final
If you make it
judgment?
$10,000, it's worth doing.
Okay.
You're not making, you make a significant penalty that'll just scare people to start with before they even consider it.
Vice Mayor?
So I've asked the school district if they have any interest in pursuing these fraudulent verifications, because it's not just Mass, there's other schools where it happens, where they find people. And it is not something that they have been interested in doing to date. I haven't ever had a discussion with them if there was some way that we could do it on their behalf. I would certainly be interested. I think this fraud is super disgusting. And the fact that people put their children in that position to go to school every day and lie to their classmates and their teachers is horrible. Broward County, as a county, actually passed something to add greater fines attached to school-related fraud for address. For address proof. I would be very happy to take that charge and try to spend time talking to the school district and get that in place. My ask would be that we approve this for another year so that we do not lose, while that conversation is ongoing, that we don't lose the ground that we have already covered. 47 seats were identified as having been obtained from people who did not live here, and were then made available for our residents. And I think that after 1 year, it was incredibly difficult for the school district to do, because the way it worked out, it happened during the school year. So you had 47 kids that left Mass and had to go back to their home schools throughout the county. You had 47 kids that are Key Biscayne residents taken out of classes and at different schools, mostly from the K-8, but different schools, that then had to go and disrupt the class at Mass with being new students. I know Mrs. Troffa lost exactly half of her geometry class in the middle school and all of her student government in January. So this was something that was a huge impact. And we certainly were not looking to disrupt this many children, but the effect is still kind of what we were looking for, to say, we're Key Biscayne, we take this very seriously. And for $30,000, or it's roughly $30,000, I think that is money well spent. And I would like to see it continue 1 more year while we pursue other things, like try to get the school district to work on this criminal
So I will
behavior.
work with you to get them, put a big fine.
Terrific.
I move
And the other thing that we're doing
like
this
to move.
year is working very hard through the manager's office and with the village attorney and the education advisory board to really educate our real estate agents on the Key about what the situation is and that they too are participating in fraud.
May I just say thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for your thoughtful and clear and very educated presentation. I commend you for that, and I move this ordinance.
Second.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, Allison?
Yes.
Is
an ordinance,
there,
Resolution.
has there been a discussion of how low this can go where you would say, okay, the school board's got it?
So no, we haven't had that conversation, and I think it's a good one. The manager raised that in my briefing, and I would think that maybe it would.
I mean, it's clearly not this year. I'm not
It's clearly
saying
not
that.
this year, and I agree with Councilmember London. I do not think that it is the business of the Village of Key Biscayne to pay for anything that someone else should be doing on their own. I do think that what we asked was above and beyond what they offer, and that's why I'm okay with it. But I'm not interested in paying for someone else's responsibility. So I think there should be some time or when the data reaches a certain point that we say, okay, we're finished. I don't know, I haven't thought about it enough to know whether or not that would be something on the wait list number or the number of identified fraudulent addresses, exactly how to quantify that. I would have to think about it. And I think maybe the right thing to do is to ask the Education Advisory Board to work on that and to talk it through and to talk to the school district and see exactly what it takes to get there.
So maybe you could bring that back to us after the discussion.
Yeah. Sure.
Any other discussion?
This is a great investment, and you should be proud of it. It had net, quantifiable 47 results that impacted families in Key Biscayne. Very cheap.
Call it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, authorizing the village manager to prepare and execute a letter of commitment to improve public parking and beach access relating to the village's inclusion within the Miami-Dade County Beach Erosion Control and Hurricane Protection Project, providing for transmittal and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Call it.
Would you like me to?
Please.
So the village has been pursuing for over a year and a half now. We've been working toward participating in a federal shoreline protection program. The village has invested in a very strong team of attorneys and lobbyists to work through this process with us. We have made major strides towards being a part of this program, and we have had a lot of political support, and I'd like to thank the team that's been working on this and the council for supporting the efforts of the staff and of the consultants and the attorneys that we've hired. However, unfortunately, we got some bad news. The village has been screened out from the Army Corps' federal participation program due to lack of public access and parking. In the agenda package, we provide some background material with regard to the U.S. Army Corps federal guidelines, what their rules are to allow us to be a party to this federal 50-year program. I think that there are opportunities that we can pursue in the agenda package. The next step would be to authorize me to proceed with sending a letter to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers outlining our willingness to make some changes to improve the public access and the parking consistent with their guidelines. If you have any questions, I can happily answer them. We also have Mr. Spencer Crowley here, who's part of the team, who can field any more detailed questions.
I think we need to move
I feel
forward.
very comfortable with this.
Yeah.
Smart.
I'm
So
good
I-
with it. This is one that
And
we
thank you
just,
for
let's
the
move
fine
forward.
work you're doing.
Thanks. Keep up the fight. I will say I spoke to our, at lunch with our state representative today, and I informed him that we were disappointed to be on the nay list so far. So he was disappointed as well, and he's going to reach out to some folks. And Mayor Jimenez also was a little disappointed. I know he'd been pulling for us, so he's also going to do the same. So
Well, you got the vote, so be careful what you say.
I just wanted to ask, one of the things I've noticed, and this is, we brought together a team. We've had great letters of support at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. And I want to know what the process is by which we send out thank you letters and how quickly that happens. And I think that we need to have a process, because I'm not sure what has even happened. We get these great letters and we probably don't respond back. And I want to make sure that we have a system in place where we respond back within a week, if not faster.
Amen.
So how can we do that?
you tell me.
No, and you have the manager. I'm sorry. I mean, and we talked about communications. It's, we.
But this is at the council level, so should we have?
Happy to sign a
But
letter.
we don't have the staff
thank
to
you.
draft it.
Okay.
I mean,
So
just like I said to that gentleman, it really is nice to say thank you to people. And it doesn't take that
Well,
much.
I'm saying we need to figure out how to say thank you.
If nothing else, just one
do we
letter signed
maybe
by the
take
mayor says
turns?
thank you. But let's get something
because
out.
something I don't know about at your house, but in my house, oftentimes thank you letters don't get done because other things get in the way. And so if we all have jobs and different things that we're doing, maybe we have some kind of a rotating schedule where we take turns who's up writing it, or
I
who
think
could
we get
do
a
it.
little complicated there. I'm fine to send the letter. Thank you. Normally, I'll say thank you when I talk to people. I mean, I think that's, you're right. I don't do formal thank you letters, but I think thank you emails or thank you for your support and just thanking people in person. But if we want to do something more formal, maybe we have a, standardized thing that we put out and we sign them and send them. We could have everybody sign them. I don't
Well,
think it
that's,
should
I
just
think
be
we
me.
should have the whole
Let's have the
council
whole
signing.
council sign
on
it.
it.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. If you
Yep.
want to have something, let's have a thank you very much for your support on the issue, and we can all send, we can have it sent out.
And Mayor, when I first came on board, I asked, and she has a lot of things, the village clerk, that we ought to really invest in, little proclamations that are already, almost all other cities have, that it's signed by the mayor or whatever, which are in essence a thank you to people who come before us. We don't have any protocol at all in this village. We don't have keys, we don't have proclamations. I mean,
We have keys,
we
because I had
have,
to give
okay.
one time.
But even at least those, you know what I mean by proclamations, thank. It'll be nice if we can buy some.
We've done
We do have them?
proclamations.
Then we
just
need to
haven't-
start using it, and
Okay,
you
let's
sign
start
them.
using them. But fair enough. Well, you're right. Okay, so we'll do it, but everybody will sign. We'll have
Yeah.
standard, everybody signs the letter. Does that work?
So maybe we can work together, Jenny and I, on a standard form that we can bring
That works.
forth.
Thank you for your support on
Those
it.
people.
Is that okay?
Right. And those
Mayor?
people
Thank you for your
wrote the
help,
letter.
Spencer.
What do you
Spencer,
think?
Spencer Crowley,
No.
98 Southeast 7th Street. All I want to do is say thank you to you all for your continued support. And
Let's keep it going.
I did have a chance to spend some time last week with some folks from the Corps, and they very much appreciate the step that we're taking, and I think it's going to be very well received. So
Awesome.
Thanks again. And
Let's do it.
if you ever have any questions, you know
Wonderful
how to reach
work.
me. So thank you.
Mayor, would you like, to the spirit of gratitude, would you like us
Thank you,
to put-
Spencer. Oh, sorry.
with regard to all the work that we've already done, as you can see, the delegation has been tremendously supportive. To maybe catch up, do we want to pass, or maybe direct us to provide a resolution
Great,
that
please.
sort of summarizes where we are and says thank you? Is that
Absolutely.
something
That
you think
works.
would be
Perfect.
nice?
Let's do it.
And,
A proclamation.
yeah.
How would the proclamation
Or a
work if
letter
they're
or-
not here?
We can
One
send
thing I could
copies
do
to
is
them.
talk to our federal representative and see what he thinks would be the most impactful.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I know a simple thank you is good, but there may be some other things we could do, suggest.
Candy and flowers.
And the
Everybody likes to
most,
come to the Key
Under
Biscayne.
$25.
Exactly, under
They can
25.
come up and rent a paddleboard.
There you go.
and the most impacting letters are to their bosses.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So when we draft these letters, this is, we need to just get in, even if it's addressed to them, then CC the boss. Because thank yous in the air, don't go in their file, don't go in their personnel file.
No,
It's
you're
very
right.
important to thank people who are helping us.
Call the question?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Perfect.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Next item under report, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's 8 o'clock. The manager doesn't have anything under her report. The next item is 530 Crandon Boulevard Park. Vice Mayor McCormick.
So this was, I asked the manager if she could have a report for the benefit of our residents as well as those of us up here, just the status of where we are with the 530 Park and what we can expect to see. Because I know a lot of people saw the pump track leaving and didn't know what it meant. So if we could get an update for the benefit of our residents, that would be great.
Sure. So just to recap, so back in April of 2019, we issued an RFP, which is a request for proposals for the construction of the park at 530. We received nine vendors attended the pre-proposal conference towards the end of April. By May, the proposals were submitted. We received 4 proposals. We assembled an evaluation committee internally that included some subject matter experts and some folks from outside of the village. We plan on bringing forth a recommendation for award at the June meeting. The value of the bid came in higher than we anticipated. It was actually 1.6 million. So along with the award for construction, we will be proposing a way to cover the gap, which is about $500,000 to be able to complete the project. And we expect construction to be anywhere between 4 to 6 months. So hopefully by the end of the year, we can have a nice ribbon cutting at the new park.
Is there any chance of getting any type of grants?
You know, we had applied for the legislative appropriation. This was one project that we looked at funding for through the Parks Trust funding at the state level. Typically, funding needs to be applied for in advance. I think at this stage, it might be difficult to obtain funding. So to manage expectations, I think it might be hard, but we can definitely take a look.
But we have Todd, and he got us that money for the park at the corner of Hampton and Heather after.
He's good.
So I
we
don't know
will-
what he does, but
He's a grant expert.
We'll take another pass at it.
That's one of the things we probably discuss another day, Vice Mayor, is how we can do better in our federal and, no criticism, everything else. There is a massive multi-billion-dollar industry that kicks in from September to October 1st in Washington, whereby the appropriations for that year, if you're running a department and you haven't spent all your money, the biggest sin in Washington is not to spend it, because that's like you. And there are people who are there with grants for everything. And I think we can do a little bit more of proactive, particularly at the federal level, for all kinds of grants. And it's a whole science. It's a big industry, but it happens. And I don't know that we are doing that. We did this in-house. Whatever Todd did, he's not a Washington lobbyist. He's not paid to be a lobbyist, and yet he got it done. So we need to institutionalize it with the people we pay for those services.
Through the Vice Chair, if I may, I agree wholeheartedly. And grants was one of the functions that when I first started, we called out in my orphanage. That's something that we needed to enhance our skills with. The new finance director that we have onboarding in mid-June, one of his responsibilities will be to focus on revenue enhancement opportunities, which would include those grants. So hopefully next year you'll see some more productivity on the grant side.
But the window of opportunity is September, August, September.
Okay.
Then it goes into the next fiscal year.
before we move on to the next item, talking about the park at the corner of Hampton Heather reminded me that there is a class there tomorrow for anyone who's listening. I think it's at 2:30. 2:30, thank you.
2:30 or 4:30.
So Ariel Simon is part of the educational component that went with that grant. She does amazing things. Anyone who's interested in going and learning about the plants in the park tomorrow at 2:30.
May I, if it's not out of order, because it also speaks to our efficiency, and you brought up, if you've heard me, that people don't know that they have these wonderful things that we've been doing for them, like parks. And almost 4 months ago, we talked about a simple thing that was mandated by state law to name the park. And I just said Serenity, and then we went, made a decision to go to the schools. We did all of that time, all of that effort, and we got nothing back. I understand from speaking to the chairperson of the Parks and Open Spaces Committee that she thinks Friendship is a good name. Can we just name the park? Why is it so complicated? It's and so that we can then get signage and we can start getting whatever name it is. I mean, it's Serenity, Friendship. I don't know. I'm just. And look at all the time we spend on it.
Did we maybe not take that next step of reaching out to the schools?
No,
or did we just not get anything back?
No, we did. We got nothing.
We did, and we got
And we got
nothing
nothing
back.
back.
So Councilmember Laredo's correct. We haven't, for now, for compliance with grant purposes, we've managed to, put something there, the park located
But I
at
mean,
or
we
something.
didn't.
But there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity
And it's not,
there.
but and also look at all the effort we read. I mean, it's been 4 months of work, and it sort of falls in the cracks. And I have no one name that I care. I just think we can come up with a name among us, period.
Haven't even had an official opening of.
I know.
Right, but let's call it something. She said that she thought, speaking to the members of your committee, that maybe friendship is fine. That's fine with me.
And do a ribbon cutting, perhaps?
But we have to decide among ourselves to just name it. It's not, I don't know, if I'd like to make a motion to name it. Is that possible today?
I don't know, can we take action on that
Yeah,
today?
but I don't see why not.
Or do we need to bring it back?
I think we've discussed this a lot. It's been public notice a lot. We even did the outreach for naming. I think we need to just take action. And let's name the park. If I would move friendship, because I think that's the word I heard back from the members of the committee.
Objection to friendship?
I would like to say I don't have an objection to friendship, and I had not thought about a name myself, but I do feel like it would be best to just move this to one further meeting, because I think it's the kind of thing that we should have it publicly noticed, so that if anyone does want to come to the podium and make their suggestion, that they have an opportunity to do so, or to make a suggestion to us in the interim. That if we've talked about it a lot, I agree, but if we're going to take action on it, I think it is the right thing to do to have it publicly noticed, so that people know, like, don't sit on your big idea any longer. This is it. We're making our decision.
And one decision we did make, and by consensus, was that we wanted to have a generic word and not any one individual or family or saint or anything like that. That'd be something that was conducive to the spirit of it, of that piece of land. If fine, I just like to.
So can we, does that need to be, to name a park, does it need to be?
We can get consensus and we'll bring it to the next agenda if you want to formally name it by resolution.
So could we do a resolution and just leave the name part blank? And
can do
then
that
we'll
too.
add that at the next meeting, and
do
then
that.
we give the public one last opportunity to chime in, and then we take our vote, but this way you know we're taking action.
Thank you.
You're on.
Thanks.
I agree.
Next item.
Next item, update on adaptive signalization.
It's me again. So same as the last item, I've heard enough people asking about what's going on with the smart lights. So I've asked the manager if she could give us an update.
Happily. So we have quite a long history with the adaptive signalization. So back in 2015, the council authorized via resolution 2015-14 for the village to proceed with the adaptive technology. Over the next 3-4 years, there were hundreds of emails and a lot of effort that went into trying to move the program forward. In March of 2018, the village received a FDOT grant in the amount of $165,000 in order to implement the adaptive technology. In resolution 2017-55, the village entered into an agreement with the county, a joint participation agreement, to be able to proceed with the installation of the lights. The village did contract under a piggyback with Miami-Dade County with Econolight, who is a vendor that currently works with the county on the adaptive program. There was a gap in the funding, which we have subsequently resolved. In February of 2018, we were told that there would be no permits required for this because we were working on a county road in coordination with the county's vendor. Notwithstanding, as things progressed through the process, we were made aware by the county that there would be some design as-built drawings required. So in April, the council authorized us to proceed with the as-builts. The village contracted one of our continuing services engineering companies to provide the as-builts. We've completed that work. We submitted the work to the county. We have verbally been told that the plans are ready. When we went to go pick up the plans, the individual who needed to sign them wasn't there, so we don't have the signed copy in hand, but I think that we're past that piece. The next step is to meet with the Econolight, who's our vendor. That meeting is scheduled for May 30th to go over the open deliverables, the construction timeline. I will point out a few things moving forward. we work hand in hand with Miami-Dade County and Econolite. There is coordination that takes place between the police and the folks that monitor the traffic signalization, both in the engineering department as well as with the police. So there is coordination across those jurisdictions. Moving forward, I think it's been a difficult undertaking for many cities to progress through this process. I can say when I worked with Miami Lakes, we had been working on this almost the same timeline back as far as 2014, 2015, and we experienced a lot of the same hurdles. I reached out to the town to see where they were, and they're almost the same exact place that we are. They actually have a meeting scheduled with Econolite and the county, so I've asked if I could join. So perhaps, we're going to be hand in hand kind of at the same place. I would encourage, I think we need to keep the pressure on, and I think Chief Press is the project lead on this, has done a good job keeping the pressure on, as will I. And I think politically as well, it's been difficult, I think, for the county. There are competing vendors who are providing the technology. It's a large network. It's a large system. So I commend the county for moving forward on this endeavor. But it's been tough. It's been tough for them, and it's been tough for a lot of the cities. But I think we've made through some of the major hurdles. I would love to be able to give you a timeline on where we are moving forward, but I don't want to set unrealistic expectations. So I think after our meeting with the Econolite later this month, and hopefully I can get into that meeting with the county, I can report back on with more certainty what we can expect when they go live.
Thank you. If after those meetings, if you could tell us a little update, that'd be awesome.
Will do.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring up the one thing that we spoke about, and I'm not going to throw the wrench in the gears because we need to get this done, but from my talks with the previous manager, I think some of our consultants, I was made aware at that time that the Mashta light was included into this, the Mashta Crandon light. And I just learned that it's not part of this, and there's other steps that we may have to do. So there may have to be a phase 2 after we get these done to see what we need to do there, because I think it's an extremely dangerous light. One who has to cross it all the time, and people who are trying to walk across it. And I think that we're kind of losing this opportunity. But we have this opportunity right now to do the 5 lights, but the 6th light, I think, is something that we need to look into.
If I can add, if there is to be a phase 2, and knowing how long these things take, just in case I'm not here, the light in front of the firehouse that stays green all of the time. I know we've had residents come and complain about it, but I saw just this morning a car went straight through the light at West McIntyre, or at McIntyre and Crandon, because when you come, especially early in the morning and especially in the right lane, when you come around the curve, you see the green light in front of the firehouse, but you can't see the next light yet. Yeah. And it's also kind of a weird dim light that you just keep going. And had a little kid been walking to school, they absolutely would have been hit. The person just cruised right through, and they weren't speeding. I truly believe they just didn't see it. But other fire stations have yellow lights that turn red when the trucks need to pull out. This one is just green all the time, and I definitely do think it needs to be looked at.
Good point.
Good idea.
Well, it wasn't my idea. Residents brought it, but I noticed it this morning.
Thank you.
Next item, follow-up on chart official evaluation process. Councilmember Petros.
I brought this forth because we have completed our first round of evaluations of our charter employees, and I really wanted people's feedback to see if they want any changes on the form and or process by which we did this.
I mean,
I like the fee. I'm sorry. You want to go ahead? Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You already started talking.
Okay, I started talking. I like the idea of giving the feedback. I think that's a positive. I'm concerned with the numerical system in terms of us. Look, if you don't have experience as an employer, if you're not, we all have different guidelines as to what the numeral system is. I'm having a tough time with speaking tonight. And I have a real hard time. We're grading people, but we don't all have the same grading system. You know what I mean? And I feel like that I like the idea of giving the feedback, and I think we need to do, I really do think that I appreciate that coming forward, and I like that we're doing that. I don't necessarily like us making the numeric determinations on people because it does have a long-standing impact on them. And I'm not comfortable, we don't have a standardized system. We're just not. We're 7 different people giving 7 different grades. And because those grades, I mean, they weight on people. You give somebody a bad grade, it takes it way down. You give somebody a really good grade, it takes them really up. I'm just not, I'm not a fan of that. I'm just putting it out there. I don't have a solution for it because I've been trying to figure it out. I will be honest with you. But that's the part that troubles me about 7 different people grading with the numeric system. But that's my input. I really do appreciate the opportunity to give feedback, and I have been recalcitrant, but the other part I have a tough time with. Councilmember Moss and then Councilmember Leonard.
I agree with you, Mayor, as well. I think the numbering part of it, to me, just doesn't work well. I think there is a solution. What I would recommend doing is that in each of the categories that you put, communication or community, whatever it is, we should say something in there about a strength and a weakness, something we want improved and something that we think you're doing well in each of those categories without putting a number next to it. And at the bottom, I think the grading system that we already have in place, which is the most important one, it goes to their merit raise. I think that that's the way you can grade somebody. You say, do they merit an increase in their salary past the COLA, and how much? Because when you put a dollar amount to it, it then becomes, I think, the same, right? So I think that, for me, those two things, I don't like putting grades next to each one of these little things. It's weird for me. I'd rather give you each feedback on where I think you're doing good, where I think we can have improvements in each of the categories, because sometimes I think you need a little bit of feedback in each of those categories if that's what we think is important. And at the end, we all put our merit increase, what we think they should get, we average it up, and that's what your increase is going to be, and that's our grading system, overall grading.
Councilmember Lennon?
My experience in the private world, in business with executives and such, we evaluated the employee, and the employee basically evaluated them. Same thing you're doing here. But then the most important thing was more than the written thing, the written report, 3.2 and a 4.7, was the face-to-face and discussion, because the idea is not to be critical, the idea is to be helpful. And basically, hey, we really like you're doing this. And again, with 7 people here, we all have different relationships on different items with these people and different expectations. So we're all going to have, so I might suggest that it might be a good idea for each one of us to meet with the charter employees and, once a year, twice a year, whenever, and say, listen, we really like what you're doing here, and tell us, maybe we don't understand, maybe you're doing something, we don't even know you're doing it. And, and make it a helpful situation to benefit everybody, but especially to benefit the employee, to make them know what we want, what we expect, or let them tell us why our expectations are not reasonable or not practical or attainable, but to have a face-to-face, not just a blank, cold piece of paper. I mean, piece of paper is fine to write down the impressions before you meet. They write and rewrite, and we swap them.
I mean, that was sort of the process that we put in place, was that you fill this out, and then you, at your discretion, meet with each person and have a discussion.
I think it should be like a mandatory thing, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I don't think we can mandate.
Sorry, Councilmember Laredo, and then
Go
we'll
ahead.
come back to you.
Thank you. I was going to say, it's not about the numerical. The way that she was recommended as a great beginning, talked about having an interview and refine and talk about how they rated themselves. I also, in my corporate experience, I never seen things, I can't believe it wasn't in place before. You have to have some form of objective measurement. It seems like we just sort of are in the, what is going to be your increase? What do you mean? Or what do you mean it's going to be your increase of salary? And that's the only measurement. There are things that we can individually. The reason this came up is because we didn't want to have it in public. And let me just remind ourselves that we fundamentally have 2 responsibilities in this charter. and one of them, and the most important one, is to supervise 3 entities. And so we have to take that responsibility very strongly. It's our only, we're not running the village. we're a board of directors having executives run different departments. So I think it's a great beginning. I think the number sequence can be changed a little bit because 3 sounds, you know, 3 sounds like, oh, it's not a nice thing. Well, 3 is what you're being paid for. You're supposed to be doing 3 and doing it well. I mean, I don't know where else you've worked, but in the rest of the real world, that 3 is you're supposed to be living up to the compensation that you're getting. So, you know, anything above that needs to be extraordinary. And I just sense from some of the feedback back that everybody's playing the numbers game. So if the feedback comes, I'm all 5, well,
Well, 5 means you're satisfied.
no,
They're doing above
no.
and beyond what you expect them to do.
Yeah,
Fine, I
well,
like the
I'm
number
just
system
saying.
because there's different interpretations
Yeah,
from
but
all
what
of us.
above and beyond is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but 3 is.
Councilmember, I'm sorry,
it's,
Councilmember Petros.
Well, I sort of agree with all of you in that, in my conclusion is the following. This is a very subjective process. Everyone does have a different method. I personally have no problem with the numbers. I like them, but that's me, as other people, you know, haven't. I think maybe the solution would be having some sort of flexible evaluation process where sort of we create some sort of form where everybody's different style can be reflected. Now, that's much easier said than done, but maybe a combination of numbers and, you know, pluses and minuses for each section. But I mean, this is a work in progress. And I thank you for getting it started. It's really the first time I think that maybe it's been quantified in the village. I definitely like the process of having a paper and then a follow-up meeting or a conversation on the phone or something. But I mean, let's work on it and move to the future. But I was okay with the form. But if, you know, other people don't like giving numbers or prefer words, as long as it gets done, who cares?
Well, I think one of the things of the who cares is to the mayor's point about different people seeing numbers, even with the description, but interpreting them differently, is that since this is government as opposed to the private sector, these documents stay with this employee, whoever they are. If they leave, they're going somewhere else. It's part of who they are, right? It's discoverable or it's public record. So I love that we're doing something, and I do really thank you, Katie, because I know you have spent a tremendous amount of time on this, and you've brought several different ideas forward, and now you brought the one that we all agreed to, and now we're a whole new body here, including me, saying, I don't know if it's right. So please don't take it that way, because we really do appreciate the work you did. I like Brett's suggestion about more narrative, because I think that does lend itself more to each individual person's style in terms of communication. And I also really like the idea at the end of the day of putting, if we're going to do some sort of numbers, of doing something with a merit, like either you don't feel like someone deserves a merit. Merit is part of our system. So as the people who are, you know, the employee and the employers, do you think they should have a merit increase? And even if it's just circle which one at the bottom, at the end, to have something.
If I may make a suggestion, and, you know, this is the first time I'm ever serving in public office, and I'm new to government, and maybe I'm totally off. But my personal practice and what I've seen many times is instead of having a merit increase in salary, you go to bonuses. Because a merit increase is forever. A bonus is not part of salary, and you can decide it from year to year. 1 year you do a great job, you can go crazy and give them a huge bonus. The next year it was okay, you can give less. It gives you that flexibility, because as you go increasing the salary, the next person that comes for that job is going to look at the last number. They're not going to look at where the person started at. So I like that evaluation, but I've always gone to bonuses instead of merit increases.
Councilmember London.
I happen to agree with you completely. Me too. I also, even though I like the idea of one-on-one interviews and I like the form, everything else, the numbers are only, to me, only good for one reason. You're seeing what the rest of the people think. Are we all thinking the same? Is everybody
think someone's a 4, or is it a 3.7, or, are we up at 5? Seems like kind of consensus. But again, we all deal with people differently in different positions, different situations, so we will have different opinions. But my main thing is, numbers fine for that reason, but to me, the personal interview with each person back and forth, telling them what we like, what we don't like, and let them tell us, and, having a dialogue. To me, that's the most important thing.
Councilmember Moss.
I would agree with you 100%, because a number, you have to put yourself in the seat of them and what they're looking for, and giving a 3 or 5 doesn't change anything for you, right? It's telling you what is that we like that you're doing and we want to see more of, and what we don't like or where we see improvement.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to take. So for me, it's not, who cares type thing. It's like they care, right? So we need to make sure we give them that constructive criticism. That's why I think the numbers for me is a weak thing. It's more of just trying to figure out how much we're going to give them in a merit pay, maybe. I don't know. But I think the constructive criticism and also thanking them for what they also do well, so they know.
There are some people that just don't give 1s, and there are people that don't give 5s. Yeah. We can all have the same opinion of a job someone's doing and all come up with completely different numbers.
Exactly.
I think that's where I like the numbers because you can quantify it, but I completely agree that you need that follow-up section at the bottom where you write something.
And look, numbers work better when you have a larger base of people where you're saying, okay, I have this much to allocate toward raises, and so I'm going to say, okay, people who receive this number are going to get this amount of raise, people are going to get, and that's the way it works. We have 3 individual entities, if you will, that report to us. So we will make that determination as to what we feel is appropriate as we go forward. That's the way I see it in terms of raises or bonuses or anything we want to do. I think that's right. That's the way we should be setting that as a group collectively. But I don't want, I know we're all kind of like harping.
In answer to some of this stuff, first of all, there was a discussion about trying to do a training so that we would all go into the numbers with the same idea. It's not a complicated system. It's 1 to 5. I think we're capable of all being somewhat consistent with our numbers if we choose. Part of the purpose of the numbers is, like you stated, that it's quantifiable. You can then back it up with a conversation. There's a second part of this form that had to do with objectives. So a lot of the things that you're mentioning actually are incorporated in this form that we came up with and the process that we discussed, which included a meeting. And the other thing is, nobody is beholden to filling out all of it or filling out any of it. So you really could pick and choose a little bit. I'm listening to what you're saying. I think we all need to recognize evaluating someone is also difficult. And that's partly what I'm hearing, which is it's an uncomfortable process. But I think it's a very necessary process. And I got a lot out of having the conversation. So I'm happy if we choose to completely go away with numbers, then we are going to have a more difficult time of showing a comparison from year to year and having something that is more reliable as far as what's happening on a progress level. And if we're going to each determine a merit increase, we're still coming up with 7 different numbers that then need to be quantified. The other part of this number is it tied into a system that's already in place in the village that determines a merit based on those numbers. So one of the things I thought was difficult that I would like to see changed is that each one of these evaluations had a different amount of things that we were numbering. So an average actually is slightly different because you have either less or more that you're averaging. And only 2 of the 3 could potentially be impacted by this because our village attorney doesn't get merit increases from us. So I'll take everything that I'm hearing. I think you are telling me that you would like to repeat this process on an annual basis, and I will try to do some nuances. I'll speak also to people that are getting evaluated to see how they feel and what they've heard, and I can bring back modifications, or we can just go through the process again next year.
Okay. May I make a suggestion?
Councilmember?
The form that we already have, keep it. And then under each section where you put the number, instead of having the pros and cons or the objectives and the deficiencies or whatever it was at the end, having that section under each question. So then, if someone feels comfortable, like I do, you can put a number and comments, or you can leave the number blank and just put the comments. And like that, it's sort of adaptable to each person's style.
But is that affecting?
Wait, hold on, Vice Mayor's next.
For me, within there was the one line for the number, and then within the sort of narrative of expectations, I actually numbered each one and then put the average, because I felt like there was a lot in there. So, I mean, I know I'm advocating for, I don't necessarily like numbers, but when
You
given
used a
the
lot of
numbers,
numbers.
I went numbers.
I like Ignacio's idea, but I also want to point out that that also applies to them as they reevaluate themselves. So if they give themselves a 4 or a 5, they need to put underneath that why they need a 4 and a 5. Am I clear? Sure. Yeah. And also, just so that we know, to commend the work you've done, it's a work in progress. But in fact, this form we approved formally. Now we just, so I think we ought to continue. And it's standard human resources practice. And it's a great step.
One quick thing, I didn't know, it was unclear to me how our numbers related to any type of increase, and should that be a little bit?
Scale that should be included, because
Yeah.
there isn't a village scale.
Or we should just, at the bottom, just have, because what if people don't want to put numbers, but also just want to say, this is how much I think they should get increased? We should have that, because if we don't put our numbers, you put your numbers, he puts his numbers, but you don't put your numbers, nobody, it skews what the final increase might be. So I think maybe at the bottom, we should have just one more saying, hey, should they get any increase or up to this, whether it's a bonus or merit pay, whatever it is that we decide.
Actually, I have a question about that. Let's say, for example, I like bonuses instead of merit increase. How is that budgeted?
That's why we're doing it now, because then.
Do we
it goes-
set aside a pot for potential bonuses, or, I mean?
I think we have to know what our numbers are going into the budget workshop, and it has to be built into the budget.
Yeah.
That's the reason we did this at this point.
Right, that's fine.
Right. In the past, we've always had such a slush fund. In the budget, there's money for everything.
Not anymore.
Zero-based budgeting.
Let's go.
Zero-based
That's it.
bonuses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, Village Ordinance 2-21, Defense of Officials and Ethic Matters. Councilmember Siguro.
Okay.
We don't have the ordinance in front of us. I realized that earlier.
Yeah, I have it on my iPad.
You want to pass it around?
Yeah.
Make copies.
I have that.
My proposal really is not very complicated. I'll explain what it is and what I propose. Apparently, back in 2006, the village passed an ordinance, Section 2-21, Defense of Officials and Ethics Matters, which basically says, and I'll summarize, I won't read, it's a little long, so I won't read from it, but basically, whenever a public official, a mayor and the members of the council, whenever they are, actually, you know what, just for clarification, I will read it. So no, everybody's on the same page. Defense of officials, this is from subsection B. Upon request of a village official, the village may, in its discretion, provide for the legal defense of any action or proceeding brought against such official for acts or omissions arising out of and in the course and scope of the official's function, when such official is charged with a violation of any provision of the Code of Ethics for public officers and employees, and then it continues on. What does that ordinance say? Basically, if one of us is charged with an ethics violation and we are exonerated, we can apply to the village manager to be reimbursed for all the defense costs. Those are basically the 3 points of that ordinance. There is ample case law before and after this ordinance, which has a much broader application to public officials. Many other municipalities have adapted their ordinances to match what the broad application is. And in summary, what I'm proposing, this ordinance says that the manager has discretion to deal with ethics issues. It does not say that the village cannot deal with any other issues such as civil or criminal. That remains the purview of this council. What I'm proposing is to modify or create a new ordinance which would basically match the current case law, making the application, the protection of public officials as broad as possible. And what I'm proposing covers 3 areas: ethics, like we already have, civil, and criminal. Now, it's not just those 3 topics. There's 2 stages of a legal proceeding, quote unquote. There is the investigation, and then there's after you are either sued or charged, 2 separate stages. Other municipalities all 3 topics and in both stages of a legal proceeding, because that is basically the direction the case law has gone in. Why is it that I propose this? It is strictly, some of it is self-serving, and it's also philosophical. Every single one of us, every single prior council member, and every single potential future council member is doing this as community service, as Councilmember Moss said once, I remember, and I really liked it. When everybody asked me, I said, why are you doing this community service? We're doing this for free. We don't get paid. And it is very easy for anyone to be accused of anything. Prevailing in the end is something completely different. As it stands, I don't think our ordinance provides us and any future council members with the protection that we would want in doing this job. So that is what I'm proposing, that we rewrite the ordinance or create a new ordinance that covers civil, criminal, and ethical matters, both in the investigative and the either after being charged or after being sued, if you're a prevailing party in that action.
Only if you're prevailing.
Right, and now prevailing has a very broad meaning.
Right, we want to define prevailing.
Right. Prevailing means, and this is related to the issue with former Mayor Lindsay that will come up later, and how this applies to her situation. And if you want to discuss it now, because they go hand in hand, or you want to discuss it later, that's fine by me. Sorry?
Why don't we do it together?
It's fine by me, but, and I'll explain my reasoning for that. In that particular case, there's been a lot of chatter and discussion about what happened, what was said, who said what, he said, she said. In my personal opinion, all of that is absolutely irrelevant. It just doesn't matter. What is relevant in that particular case is an accusation was made, an investigation was begun, that investigation required legal representation, and in the end, there was no action taken. That means she was a prevailing party. Personal feelings, whatever, just doesn't matter. It's absolutely irrelevant. So based on those 4 facts, in my opinion, that is why I brought the other issue. Because if we're going to adopt this position philosophically, which applies the current case law as I see it, as I've read it, then we have to apply that philosophy and that potential case law to her situation. As it stands, the manager does not have the discretion to deal with her situation because it falls outside of the ordinance. But that does not mean we as a body don't have that capacity. We do. Questions?
I have a question.
Councilmember Laredo, and then Councilmember
Yes,
Lund.
I've communicated, and this goes to our efforts that we, I guess, started on Saturday, hopefully we will, of controlling our agenda. So I'm going to first step back from the merits of the 2 presentations and say it is, to me, I don't feel comfortable with an item that has this kind of effect and President setting decision, which expands from ethics to civil and criminal and other things, and not even have an attachment. The same thing, and more importantly, about item 12, which I learned just as on the agenda, as you put it on, and none of the facts. I tried as best as I can as a volunteer to read the facts and divorce myself. I have not, either in the previous case we discussed or in the case of this petitioner. I did not know her before. I never worked with her in the council. So I really come at it very, very unbiased. But I find it not correct and not fair to some of us to load these kinds of very important cases and with no backup. I simply, so that you know beforehand, I will ask, I think it's appropriate to have this defer. So I have a chance even today and to read the facts on item 12A as well as were you proposing. To do this like this, to me, is not, I mean, I have questions to fact. I want to talk about the amount, show me the billing, show me the thing. I want to be able to explore all of that. The process is flawed for us to make decisions, particularly when it comes to spending money, if it comes up this way. And I know it was not your intention to do that, but I really think I need to learn more and read more about those two cases.
Mayor, before additional, may I make one clarification?
Let's go around the table, just because otherwise you're going to be responding to everybody, and I'd rather have
Write it down.
Well, yeah, write it down. Councilmember London, I know what you're trying to do, but I'd rather.
I have no argument with what you're saying, and I also understand where Luis is coming from, but we're not going to be voting on anything. He's talking about preparing something for us to look at in the future. So I don't really concern that we don't have it in front of us. He's talking conceptually. What are we talking about? Not actually tonight to say we're going to do this, this, and this. But my question is this.
Well, excuse me, just as a correction. As it relates to item 11, 12, but 12, he is asking for.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about.
Well, in general.
Okay.
So the only thing that I do have a question was, how do we control costs? Because in other words, someone go out and spend a fortune, say, because they think they need a defense, and, really, they go hire a guy for $1,000 an hour because they're not paying for it. I mean, what do we do?
Well, I think that's a discussion. If he brings back an ordinance, I think then we have that discussion.
Mayor,
fine.
Are we happy about?
May I respond?
Okay, go ahead and respond to that.
That's exactly what I forgot to add to when I was speaking. My proposal is that we photocopy part of the language in the ethics ordinance, which basically says that what's reimbursable, and I'll paraphrase, are reasonable attorney's fees, and that's a loaded legal term.
Sure is.
Reasonable attorney's fees. Or basic, my proposal is not, and this is very good point, Councilmember Laredo. There are two separate things. One is the conceptual, item 11, and the other one is the particular issue, 12. Yeah. With regard to the conceptual, with regard to the specific, my proposal is not we instruct the manager to pay the legal bill that's been presented. My proposal is that we instruct or we empower the manager to analyze it, negotiate it, and pay the reasonable attorney's fees. Now, what that is, that's a whole separate issue. But you're absolutely correct. I'm not saying we should pay $1,000 an hour or $1 billion hours.
Well, the other thing,
wait, no, Ed, sorry, I'm trying to keep.
He was answering my thing. So basically, what you're saying is reasonable, and I think in the medical world, they call it usual and customary. And that is what destroyed the medical system in America, as far as the thing.
Exactly. Thank you.
So really, we have to be more, when you draw this up, you gotta, I think, have to be more specific between, reasonable, usual, and customary. And I don't know how to do it, you're the attorney, but somehow there must be a way of, whether it's an approval where we have to approve the legal expense before they incur it, the lawyer, the rate, or whatever else. That's all.
Okay, Councilmember Moss, and then Vice Mayor.
I first want to start off, I don't think we should combine these two things together because I'm getting dizzy by keep talking about one that's an actionable, it seems like an actionable item that says a motion to grant, and the other one's a conceptual idea. I like this idea that you're taking this on. I think you should bring something back. I agree with Councilmember London. There has to be some type of definition on what reasonable fees really mean so that whoever is in an issue like this, they kind of know their limitations of what they are able to do. So I say go ahead and bring something back for us.
Is that a motion so I can second it?
Motion.
I second it.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
So I agree with you that that we're all volunteers, and that certainly in this day and age, people can say, feel free to say whatever they want and make accusations, whether they're true or not, right? So that is something that would prohibit someone maybe from running for office if they were wide open. I have concerns when you are writing something to bring back. I have concerns about the the village paying for representation during investigations, mostly because I think when we look at sort of famous legal things that we've seen in even just in the country, you can hire someone so good that you kind of scare off anyone from wanting to press charges. Like maybe it's just not worth it for them, right? You're going to go away, whatever. And I don't know that that's the right thing for our residents to be paying for. If someone, let's assume somebody actually did something wrong, and they hire an attorney who's
Johnny Cochran.
So Johnny Cochran comes in with the glove, and the state's attorney decides it's not worth it for me. Is that right? That our so when we're doing that,
That's how good he is.
that part makes me nervous. And you say that there's case law that says the investigation period is covered. I've heard the opposite, and so I definitely need time, even when we get to this next item, to really have prepared documentation from, no offense to your legal skills, I'm sure you are amazing at what you do, so that the legal counsel that we pay to represent us.
May I respond?
To advise us.
Someone else have a comment?
You can go on this one.
Then if it's okay with the council, speaking only on item 11, the conceptual part, I'll work with the village attorney to draft a proposed expanded ordinance to address a couple of things that you said.
May I just correct just a minute? Would you be kind enough to not just ordinance, but give us some reasoning?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. There are many different, there's a few different ways of dealing with a couple of your concerns. Like I said, the term reasonable attorney's fees has its own meaning, which means you don't go out and hire an attorney for $1,000 an hour. There's a floating scale, which involves specialty, how many years in practice, how many hours work. That exists. There's also, I believe there's some other municipalities that have a cap on an amount per hour. So if someone gets accused of someone and they go out and get a lawyer, they say, okay, the village is going to pay up to X amount. If it's anything above that, I'm on the hook for that. That's another possibility. With regard to your concern about the investigation, now, with all due respect, that's a very dangerous, slippery slope, because the defining authority will be either an ethics board, a criminal court, or a civil court. And that includes the state attorney or any ethics investigators. If one of those bodies reaches a legal conclusion, and that includes no action on something, then that person has prevailed. If that person then comes to the village to be reimbursed, and then we sit as a second body judging whether, well, I don't think they're really innocent, or they're not really guilty, or one way or the other, then that opens up a whole different can of worms. And I'm not even, it's not my area of law, I'm not an expert in that, but I'm not sure if that would actually hold up in court. That's why you have to go by whatever authority makes whatever final decision.
Or decide that you're not going to reimburse for the investigation portion.
If you decide you're not, in my opinion, and I have absolutely no problem with more authority being presented, there should have been an email, and I got a copy of the email with case law attached. You guys
Wouldn't we just defer all this conversation to?
Yeah.
There's three.
When you come back with a report?
One was ethics.
Why don't we do this?
The other had charges attached.
Right, because our ordinance cannot be contrary to law. So that's a problem. If we say we're not doing it, but a superior law says you're doing it, we're doing it.
Yeah, I don't think there was one.
Okay, let's bring this back.
sorry, with, when you're bringing something back with this idea of
With the
reasonable
conceptual
fees and
problem.
something of a cap, we got into this when we were discussing the pension. I have an issue with a dollar amount cap only because we're putting something in action that will continue for a long time and prices are going to go up.
Correct. That's why a lot of people
You like
use
that, Kate?
reasonable attorney's fees.
All right, well, bring something back. I think, are we all in agreement that he brings something
was-
back and we have some more, you know?
Yeah, there was a motion and it was seconded.
Perfect.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
This
Motion-
is a crazy idea, you lawyers, experts, but there is no.
Law school too.
Yeah,
Don't go
but
talk
there
out.
isn't.
Yeah.
But there isn't a punitive anything we can do for frivolous charges.
I'm sorry?
We cannot take the other side. I know it's a little wild to suggest this for frivolous.
Yeah, well.
Because it seems to be that the
on this-
people, there's a cottage industry of coming and insulting and all of that.
There's a 57105 on the civil side, but I don't know if there's a criminal,
there's-
well, there's
But
got to be a
in our
criminal
ordinance.
statute. If you
No,
bring-
in the ordinance that he wants to come back with.
Well, there's a cause of action called malicious prosecution.
Right.
That
Okay.
if you
Can you put it
use-
in this ordinance?
But
No, it's a law.
we
It's
can't
a
do it.
common law.
Whoever, we as a body can't enforce that.
It's
Whoever
a
gets
criminal law.
accused has,
They have standing. The
They-
person who's been accused.
Right.
is the one that has standing, not the
yeah,
village.
Yeah,
not
that's
the,
right.
not us.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Next.
Next item, undergrounding status and update, Councilmember Segurola.
Okay, this was, I partially said it on Saturday at our session. Basically, since the last meeting where we decided to put everything on hold, unfortunately, I believe that a lot of people, the prevailing sense is, great, the state of Florida is taking over everything, we're done, our undergrounding project is over. That's just not the case.
Nope.
If you look at the legislation that has apparently passed, number one, it will not underground everything in the village. It will basically only underground the laterals,
right.
which is the wooden poles behind the houses. I'm sorry, the
Lines.
electric lines that run on the wooden poles behind the houses. Why that distinction? Because as we have learned, the majority of the poles on Key Biscayne are owned by AT&T. The phone and the cable will continue to run on the poles. So it is potentially, it is plausible that FPL undergrounds the utility lines, but the poles with phone and cable stay up behind people's houses. So that does not solve our undergrounding problem, number one. Number two, the legislation that passed does not include the feeder lines, the 6 feeder lines that come into the village either. Number three, apparently at the last minute, there were some changes made to the legislation, which hardening, as we have learned, is the concrete poles, may be substituted for undergrounding. And Councilmember London explained on Saturday that it is not in FPL's business interest to do that. And I don't disagree. I'm just scared. But it is potentially possible, or it is legally possible, and whether plausible or not, for FPL to harden, put up concrete poles, and then pass the bill to the residents of Key Biscayne, which creates a whole different set of problems. I agree that we should spend as little money as of taxpayer funds, as little as taxpayer funds as possible until we know what the Public Service Commission does. But there are 2 things that I think we can and should continue to do at this time while we wait out the process with the Public Service Commission. Number one is to go ahead and go back to authorizing the manager to put out for bid the survey of the village. I believe we've budgeted $98,000. It's thought that it could be done for less than that. And why do I say the survey? Because number one, no matter what version of the project the PSC finally approves, we're going to need a survey for it. Number two, the 2040 board that just created, they're going to need the survey. Number three, I'm guessing Public Works and other departments within the village are going to be able to use that survey also. So there are a lot of benefits to doing the survey. The second thing that I think we should move forward to is the financing workshops. Although we do not know what the final number is going to be for the undergrounding project, given this change in the legislature, it's going to be less than 46 million, hopefully. That still does not change the fact that we have to decide how it is we're going to finance it. So a financing workshop where we discuss the different options, no matter what the final number is, I think would be to the benefit of all. That financing workshop would actually also benefit for future analysis, given whatever is done that's recommended by either the 2040 board or this council with regard to other resiliency projects. We could just all know what the possibilities are and how they work. So those are the two things I think we need to move forward on. One, doesn't cost anything because the financing, I think, is basically administration efforts, and we still have that one paid trip by the guy from Raftellus, and Chris can handle the other parts we decided last time. So the financing really doesn't cost anything. It's just a survey. And now that brings me to the third topic, which I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I've said it a million
Not a
times.
referendum, I'm sure.
I'm sorry?
Not a referendum.
A referendum.
I like that.
I think we really need to do a referendum now more than ever, given what the legislation has done, because arguably there has been chatter that undergrounding is an aesthetics project. And the problem is, if FPL undergrounds the utilities and the only thing left behind the houses are poles with phone and cable, then that argument gains weight. Just for the record, I'm completely for undergrounding everything.
Actually, that would be contrary to the argument that it's for aesthetic purposes, because if they underground the power lines and leave the telephone up there, then aesthetics haven't gone away. You've still got the ugliness. You've just got resilient power.
Exactly. So it becomes telephones. You got cell phones and cable. Well, you missed TV for a few days after the hurricane, but your power is fine.
But it's not
because it's underground. It's aesthetics because it's not necessary. The pole. To take down the pole, it's to beautify, to not have the pole behind the house.
Right, which is aesthetics.
Which is aesthetics.
Exactly. So,
But some people don't have the pole in the back there.
correct. Well, a few, I think 100 and something houses and something like that. So it goes back to, I'm all for undergrounding, but if we're going to do a project of this size, this cost, and this length, I think we need a mandate. And the only way of doing that is by getting a referendum. So, once again, shoot me down.
We're going to get shot down.
Ed, start out.
No.
You may fire when ready, Mr. Schmidt.
But to me, it's unusual that you say that the poles are owned by AT&T. And the reason I say that, because I remember when Key Biscayne started, everybody had electric, but the telephone was at Vernon's drugstore. People wanted to make phone calls. There wasn't phones all over. So I don't understand how AT&T got all the poles when they were put in by FP&L to have electric to the village. But obviously you checked that out, and you verified that, they bought all the poles from,
I don't know that that's actually true, because you guys didn't know it and we heard it. Our consultant didn't know it, and then someone sort of looked it up behind him, and then he said, "Oh, that was a horrible moment."
No, the consultant did know it. The guy from Kimley Horn, the last time he came here,
Josh standing there didn't know it. The person in the chair told him.
all I'm saying is that the odds are it's not right. I mean, only because, why would AT&T put up poles after FP&L put electrical lines in before the telephone lines went in? But maybe they did, but that's number one. So I'd look at that. Number two, you mentioned about a survey. We need the survey. Actually, all we'd be doing is the drops. They'd be putting in all the lines. We'd be going to the drops to the individual houses from the transformers. We don't need a survey to go from a transformer to a house. They need a survey for where they're going to put the undergrounds in, the drops to the house, go to the disconnect to the transformer. So we don't need a survey for that. They need a survey. So any kind of survey we would do would be a total waste of money. So I'm 100% against the survey because they're going to have to do the survey. So why should we do it? And it won't speed anything up by us doing it. Number three, referendum. I know you're for referendum. Tony is proud of you. You're doing a good job. I know you resigned. You're no longer vice president of the condo presidents, but he'll be proud of you anyway. We're here. I mean, and to say a referendum, you got to give people, assuming you wanted a referendum, you need all the facts so people can make a decision. And one of those facts is, how much is it going to cost who? Which goes into the finance. If it's a minor amount of money, or if it's just the drops, they're paying for everything else,
and we decide that each homeowner pays for the drop from their house, to the disconnect, then it doesn't affect anybody but the homeowners, doesn't affect the condominium, so why should they even vote on it? So I think until you have more information, you really, number one, don't have a referendum, number two, you don't have a survey, and we can also find out who owns the poles.
Ditto. Councilmember Moss.
I think another thing that we should add to the list right now is that, and I spoke to Chad a little bit about this yesterday, is that we should make this a legislative priority about what is happening right now that has happened in the state, and talking to FPL, talking to the PSC as well, and get our lobbyists moving over there to make sure that we're in the forefront about what we are doing, what we want to do, and make sure that, we're in front of this game. So I think that's something that we can really do at this moment. I think could be one of the most important things that we do. Second, referendum. I'm guessing you want the referendum whether we want to do the project or not, and have the people decide that. So we did a survey, and if you go into the survey that was done on page 22, burying of the power lines was number 2 as the most important thing, at 79% as high priority to very high priority. It was only under stormwater improvements. It was actually above beach nourishment, sea level mitigation, installation of traffic lights, and parking in the village. It's the second highest thing. We've done a survey. We know that majority of the people want to do this project. I think going back and spending money, going through a referendum, and I can tell you from personal experience, when I go to vote, I don't know all the referendums that are going to be on there, and it's very hard in the 10 minutes that you're standing there to read a paragraph and understand exactly what what this whole project is about. It's really difficult to do that, and I think that's the reason why we're elected. I mean, I would want to put a motion right now to take a vote on that we don't go through a referendum on this project, that we make the decision.
I second it.
And if I have a second, maybe we go through a roll call vote so we can put that conversation to end or not, whether we have it there. So affirmative vote with that would just be, and again, this is only referendum to do the project or not to do the project. I'm not talking about general obligation bonds and stuff that we have to go through. That's different. But this is just about deciding the project, because I'm
having seconded, can I say something briefly?
We've never done a referendum or not to do a referendum vote. So this would be to see on the council, is there any will or even a close to a will to go through that process?
Councilmember
There are two
Petros.
issues.
Sorry, Councilmember Petros, then Councilmember Laredo.
That's okay. First of all, thank you for bringing up the financing again. I, again, think that's the number one issue in this project. And in discussing the referendum, I respect your desire to get that wish or to get that buy-in from the community. I think Brett spoke to the fact the buy-in of the survey actually happened before Irma, and Irma really bounced up people's interest in having this happen. Right. And referendums are costly and time-consuming. And it's very likely we may have a referendum about the financing. We don't know that yet. We have to make that decision. So I really can't understand why we would do both, because at the end of the day, if we end up with a financing referendum, it's going to answer that question anyway for half the price, basically, and it'll be in a shorter amount of time. So I think that you will get your answer just in a slightly different avenue. And I would support trying to move forward on making a decision about the financing as soon as possible, with the understanding that there's issues out there on the state level that we need to be sensitive to and may impact it to some extent.
Councilmember Laredo.
Thank you. 2 quick points. As it relates to the legislature, which we still don't even know if the governor has signed and what powers he gives to the PSC, et cetera. I understand that June 11th we'll have a full report. So that would be at the appropriate time. About the study of the survey that you read from, there was another survey that I took, which is last November. It was called An Election, and it's people. It's under my system of government, representative democracy. They elected us to decide. That's all we do here. It's decide. The other one, the so-called participatory democracy, which I'll give you history of how that has not worked anywhere in the world except chaos in Venezuela and other places. The American way is representative democracy. You ran for office to decide, and I'm prepared to make decisions at the correct time, and so I've seconded your motion and put it to a vote, and
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's put that to a vote.
Let's do it.
Hey, I would just respond to a couple things, just for the record.
Sure.
Councilmember Moss, with regard to the survey, with all due respect, that survey was done before. A few hundred people at best responded to it. It was before undergrounding was on anyone's radar. There were no facts to back that up. There was no options on financing. There was nothing else. So I understand, yes, conceptually people said, yay, we want underground. But that had nothing to do with where we are now. So yes, there was a survey, but for me, that survey is worthless. With Councilmember Petros, with regard to your financing referendum, I do agree with you.
I'm not saying it's happening, I'm saying it could happen.
Right, it could happen. Well, I think it should happen. I think there are two questions that need to be asked. Number one, do we want to do this? And then if your answer to number one is yes, then number two, how do you want to finance? Though that's the only way to get a clear mandate. To do otherwise is to basically, this board could decide we're going to do this way. It could go to a vote and get shot down, and we've just wasted a whole lot of time.
Ed, you get more comment, then I get a comment, then we're calling the vote
Real
on this.
quickly, again, if talking about the financing, Ignacio, and the payment, if in fact they put everything in and we put just drops in and each homeowner does the drop, there's no financing even involved or very minimal amount of anything. So you don't even have a financing thing and it doesn't affect all the condominium owners.
So why don't we just vote then?
Okay, I'm against referendums just generally. I think, we are elected to do this. We're the ones who are going to spend the time on it. We've gotten the will of the people. The issue, underground has been around since the first time I got on council. We've been talking about it on council since 2006. So I can tell you, this issue's been in front of people for a long time. Let's call the vote, and then let's move on to the next item.
Councilmember.
Against having a referendum.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Councilmember London,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McCormick,
This is a motion against having
Yes.
a referendum, yes.
No referendum. No means yes.
Yeah. This means no.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Councilmember Sigurola,
No.
Mayor Davy,
Yes.
Councilmember Laredo.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item,
I know. I can.
Now we get into the contentious
Village
issues.
Beautification
Like pulling teeth.
Board and Landscaping Update, Councilmember Sigurola.
Well, there's really not a whole lot on that because we haven't.
Then let's
finished.
move on.
Just one thing. First order of business, I guess, for the first meeting will be, I'll ask them to review the 2007 landscaping master plan and come back with recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Next
discussion
item
on
is
the-
in-house village attorney, Councilmember Sigurola.
Again, this one's going to be short. The council asked me to come back with information on areas of law, payments and all that stuff. I requested information about that from the village, but it is not in the most digestible format, and I'll leave it at that. So basically, there has to be a whole lot more in-depth analysis, potentially invoice by invoice.
Let us know when you want to come back.
And I spoke to our attorney today. His office might have more easily digestible information in a better format, so I'll find that out and come back.
Perfect. Thank you.
Next item, proclamation for Immigrant Heritage Month 2019, Mayor Davy.
Okay, as you're all well aware, June is Immigrant Heritage Month, and I would like to issue, actually, Councilmember Laredo, I want to do a proclamation.
So moved.
Can we just, let me do it? Okay, I think it's important that we
Second.
honor our
Second.
immigrants, and let's go.
Thanks for asking.
You're
All
welcome.
those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is Resilient 305 Mayor's Accord, Mayor Davy.
Okay, this is tab 13. You'll see. Oh, Karina's here? Hello, how are you? Karina is Miami-Dade County's Resilience Coordinator. I had the pleasure of meeting with her, I guess, about a week and a half ago. And so you'll see in the tab, there's a pledge of the mayors of Miami-Dade County. You want to explain
Sure.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you for being, I didn't realize, I apologize. I didn't realize you were here for this. I didn't
worries.
recognize you, so I apologize for making you sit through all of our stuff.
It's okay, fun to hear. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, thank you for having me here. I'm Karina Castillo. I work in the Miami-Dade County Office of Resilience as a resilience coordinator. My official duties are being a liaison to the cities and to the universities in our community. So I'm here because about 3 years ago, next week, exact to the date, Miami-Dade County, along with the cities of Miami and Miami Beach, entered into the 100 Resilient Cities program, which is pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation. We were accepted as it's the first unique partnership accepted into this global network of cities. It's the other 99 or 100, because Houston was accepted as 101st, are individual cities. So this is really a unique partnership because we realize that this is a multi-jurisdictional effort. And we approach resilience about the community's capacity to adapt and to thrive in the face of shocks and stresses. So an example of a shock would be, for example, the Zika outbreak or king tide flooding, whereas the stress could be things such as affordable housing, inadequate transportation system, and of course, sea level rise. And so we work together, stakeholder engagement, 3 years, 3 very long years. We finally have our document that's ready to launch May 30th, next week, next Thursday. And so we're here to ask for all the municipalities to join us, to pledge to collaborate, to work with us, to move forward action items that we identified, hearing from the community, hearing from stakeholders. This started with meeting with the cities, and so we came back and debrief the cities on where we are, and so we'd be happy to answer any questions, and we hope to see
I'm
you all.
prepared to move this if you promise me you're going to say nice things about us when you leave. 'Cause we
yeah.
made you wait until 9 o'clock.
Yeah, no,
I move it.
I really appreciate it.
I over-
The reason it's on here is because I'm
No,
going to
it's-
sign the
I'm kidding.
accord and the pledge, and I just wanted, your buy-in on
Thank
these
you.
things.
I move it. That's
Thank
important.
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
Wonderful
coming.
work.
Have a good
I'll
night.
see you next Thursday.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
That's
Next
the first thing I've
item
ever proposed that went unanimous.
is Youth Council discussion. Councilmember
What
Morrow.
happened to?
Okay, so I put this, I don't know if everybody has this little piece of paper. I think it was passed out already. So I put this together quickly just to give you an idea of what I have in mind. I would like to give this to our attorney to come back with a resolution, but quickly, the goals and objectives of fresh ideas with a youth perspective on municipal issues, provide education on local government to our youth, create civic engagement and local participation among the youth to provide knowledge and skills for the future leaders. The composition of the committee, which I don't know if it's a board or committee anymore. I'm a little confused about that, but the composition of what I have in my mind, and I welcome all feedback from this, but I was thinking 9 members, 7 members would be appointed by us, 2 members would be appointed by the public school, 1 from the K-8, 1 from the math. The age of the members would be 6th grade through 10th grade. 1 each.
Well, no, I have a question
Okay.
about why 6th through 10th and why
I'll
not
tell you.
11th and 12th.
Member of the youth council will serve, each member will serve 1 year. There's a little bit of a typo there. Will serve for 1 year. We will do our new appointments in May on an annual basis. The youth council would begin in September and they would end in May, since that's about the school year. I've already talked to Todd with our manager's permission, and Todd was very excited of possibly taking that with one of his staff. He said it would work great with the community center, so he could be our one of our staff liaisons there. And we were actually speaking about meeting after schools, like 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whenever the after school area is where they can go and meet in a room there.
I move this. I mean, I think this is a great idea.
The sixth grade through 10th grade, I know you have a question about that. I talked to a couple other people who were involved with the previous youth council. They said that the 11th and 12th gets difficult because they're starting to think
So
about
much
college and
stuff,
stuff,
right,
and they're kind of going out. And they said that the real meat of it is in the 9th and 10th. The person who came to me and asked me to do this is going to be in 6th grade, and she had the ambition to do this. so that's why I want to include the sixth graders, because they're out there and they're good, and we need to include them in there. And we can also tie that into the K-8 as well, so there's some people on here. This part won't be part of the resolution, but it's just an idea, but the possible program structure, I was thinking, but it can change, it all depends. But I was thinking September through December is more of the education and research where they can learn about the local government, about budgeting and the budgeting process, researching different issues that affect them as youths and that's affecting our entire community, and developing an advocacy type strategy on these issues. That way, when they come back after Christmas break in January and through May, they can participate on council meetings, public comments, presentations, advocate, meet with council members, and actually try to see what they've been working on researching, see it through, that they have some influence on it. And that's it.
Good. Vice Mayor and then council member.
Question about the composition. My suggestion would be 7 members, and they can use our actual seats. And also, I think I like the idea of it being more just at large from the village than 2 specific schools, because we have so many kids here that we have other schools on the key, but we also have a lot of kids who go to school off the key. So, but great job. I think this is really exciting.
Councilmember Petros.
Those are my 2 points. I would just add that Gables is our feeder high school, so I want
I would
to
take
make
out
that.
the school designations,
Yeah,
but that'd be
I
the
think
only.
that's.
So we just appoint, our 7 would appoint the kids, and that's it.
I think they could apply and then.
Yeah, we could do like we discussed in our new website design. We had discussed having some kind of a portal or whatever where people could apply for different boards as adults. We could do the same for kids, and we could also maybe have a box in the community center where they could submit their interest.
Excellent.
Perfect. Bring it back. Let's go.
Okay. I'll bring it back, and I'm trying to bring it back on the June meetings, and then August, I'm hoping that it's going to be 2 readings of an ordinance, I believe. And we may be able to do the appointments. If you guys can start thinking of some people in August, we might be able to get some appointments up there, because I would like to see if we can get this one, even though we're a little bit late, if we can get it started in September, October to get that first one rolling. We don't have to wait a whole nother year.
Do we need a motion? It's been moved, right?
It's already been, I moved it.
Could we send out a constant contact so that we could start soliciting interest?
That'd be great.
And I don't have a copy.
Jurisdictions are going to be all of Key Biscayne.
I'll work with you as far as the jurisdiction
6
with
through
the.
10.
Yeah, as soon as you can, put it out in constant contact.
Once we have, the reading.
Perfect.
I have a copy of that thing. I didn't have a copy.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But it's okay. You give it to me later. Oh, thank you.
All right, let's go.
I voted for
It
it
was
because I
second.
trust
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Pension Board, Mayor
Okay,
Davey.
pension board, I want this is one we all vote on, so let's get bring some names. We have a pension board. We have somebody sitting who could be reappointed, but if anybody has other names that they'd be interested in appointing to this pension board, let's bring some names.
Yeah, who's the opening?
Well, Bill Stevens is in the seat right now.
He's done?
I don't know if he's done, but I just wanted to bring it, I don't.
The term's
He's
up.
up, and one of the things that we discussed was moving people through these boards. We don't want to
Okay.
continue it. We don't want to,
That's what I'm just asking.
so that's.
But he can
I just-
reapply, right?
He can
reach out?
reapply,
One of the
certainly. I will
reach
reach
out
out,
to
I
him,
will
make
call
sure.
Bill and see if he's interested. And, this is not my own, I don't
we
get to
just
appoint
wanna
on
know,
this one.
so.
This is the one where we all have to vote.
No problem.
So I just,
Well, and
I
it's
will
good
reach
that you
out.
approach him not as a requesting that he stay, because we
Right.
want to try to carry on the spirit of what we try to do on Saturday, to bring in, there's so much talent.
Right. So
don't know.
that's why it was brought to my attention by the clerk. She brought it to my attention, so I wanted to make sure that
Thank
I
you.
wasn't
That's a
remiss.
5.
Good.
Sorry, bad joke.
Let's move on to the
Next time.
Presbyterian, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Presbyterian parking lot. Okay, this is my item. I don't know. Essentially, my understanding, and I would ask the manager to correct me wherever I misstate, because I'm going to be a little bit broad on this, but at some point around Hurricane Irma, we were looking for a place for our waste, for our hurricane debris. Thank you.
It was prior to for an outfall project.
Okay, thank you. There was a project. The village entered into an agreement with the Presbyterian for the use of their parking lot for outfall debris. We agreed to pay a fee. We haven't paid, and we agreed to resurface, correct? We agreed to resurface the parking lot? Yeah, Tim, come on up. You're going to be able to speak better to what we promised. And my point is, it hasn't happened yet. There's been some back and forth. And I think, look, it's a resident that did us a favor at a time. And there's some, I'll say, the council didn't approve it before it was entered into. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And so the concern by the manager is because the council didn't approve it, we shouldn't do it. But the point is, the village as a body made an agreement with the Presbyterian to do this in return for their use for our use of their lands. I feel it's incumbent upon us to live up to our side of the bargain. I don't think that this village, especially with residents, I don't think we should be getting into a dispute when the agreement was made and they've lived up to their part of the bargain. You want to speak to it specifically, Tim?
I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You're with the Presbyterian, right?
My name's Tim Gamwell.
I heard of you.
You've heard of me?
All good.
You're famous. I am a humble servant of the Presbyterian Church, and I'm an elder and the treasurer. And back in 2016, I think it's Tony Brown, I'm not sure, might have the last name is Brown, and VC Construction asked if they could use a portion of our parking lot to house a front-end loader and some equipment for redoing the, I think, sewers or whatever project was going on. And in our discussions that we asked them if they could resurface and clean the drains out because the drains flood and we had a lot of water there. And the understanding was it would be for 3 to 6 months. And as it turned out, it ended up being for over 3 years, and they took over basically the back part of the parking lot, different than what we had talked about. And as we've tried to be good neighbors in a Christian spirit, we had the space and it wasn't really an issue. And so they utilized that whole back area, and it became quite a mess, unfortunately. And it took some help from the chief of police and from others to finally get the debris moved out of there, which they did. And then exchanges back and forth to have, it was VC Construction, was Ricky Garcia, who I was working with, to come in and basically clean the drains out and resurface the parking lot area. And unfortunately, it just never got done.
May I just say, first of all, thank you for helping us in the emergency, obviously at that time. And wisely,
we're all neighbors, so we all
absolutely, and that's
the
the whole point of what I'm going to make here. We do have a spirit of Key Biscayne. I mean, trying to draft a memorandum and too many lawyers involved in the middle of that crisis is great of you to trust us. And I was not privy to all those discussions, but it seems to me that we have a fairness issue here that is very, very, very high. It's a wonderful neighbor that has helped us in a lot of ways, and I move that. Irrespective of what else happens, that we take care of this promise. I understand it's on or around 120,000, so I'll make a motion even not to exceed 120,000 or something to that effect, so that we are compensating for a service that was very vital at the time and that we fell short. Nobody did it on purpose, I'm sure, but you need to be. We need to be equitable. I think it's the right thing to do.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. Anybody else?
Is there anything else in the history that we should know about that hasn't been lived up to that we can fix, try and address?
There's a lot of history, and as I said, the property is a great location, and we've talked for many years through the 2020 process, and prior to that, of trying how to use the property to benefit, obviously, the church and also the community. And we've had many discussions with many different council people and some village people, and we just seem to get a point to an agreement on something, and then it falls apart. And again, we're hoping that at some point in time that the property can be used for the benefit of the church and for the benefit of the community.
If I ever get elected president, I'm going to appoint you ambassador because you're being so nice.
Don't do
no,
that.
I am very serious. This, what you're bringing up is very serious. And if you were here earlier, and it's on one of my items to talk about how we get into misunderstandings and create ill will with the greatest intentions. The way to hell is paved with good intentions. So I apologize for all of those that preceded me that probably get you confused. But you clearly know that you have a very accessible group of 7 here. And I'm concerned that you need to know that we're here individually and otherwise, because we have a little cottage industry of people talking on behalf of us, and even without ill intent. And I've heard stories. Okay. And I think you're great the way you're handling it with the grace and diplomatic skill.
We're trying to be humble, so we've hired somebody that's not so humble to try to.
But I think I better stay with your system. I better stay with you. I think
There's a motion on the table?
I think it's a good point, Mayor, and I like to move.
The motion's been made, you've been seconded.
What are we moving?
To live up
Pay
to.
attention.
What?
We're paying
To
off the
what?
debt of fixing up correct me if I'm wrong.
The,
What were the
repaving-
promises made?
Resurfacing
Michelle?
of the.
Or Tim?
Tim.
We talked about helping clean out the drains, and
Correct.
as I said, and then resurfacing the parking lot so it's
And it hasn't been
presentable.
done yet, right?
No,
No.
It hasn't been
So we're
done.
going to make a motion that we're going to do it.
Yes, sir.
That we're going to do it.
So I know what the motion is.
Can I
Yes,
suggest?
Michelle,
Don't
please.
suggest anything. Let's take a vote.
No, but, no, it's part of the
Please.
motion, because Jake have obtained already proposals, okay? And if we go to the bidding, it's gonna take 2 or 3 months. And
Okay.
we like to do this now during the school time that is in
Oh,
session.
you when they're out.
Otherwise, we gotta wait until probably another year, and we need to take care of this as soon as
Can
possible.
we do
So
that? Well, we're
I don't
gonna
know
do
what will be the procedure then.
We're going to
To
do it.
wait.
The motion, we're doing it.
Yes, correct.
I know, but.
She wants it done
She's
faster.
saying if the village does it, she doesn't want to wait for us
Fine, we're
to
gonna
That you
tell-
waive
an
that or you.
RFP and all.
Jake will go ahead and take care of it.
You do the proper procedure in order to expedite this that can be accomplished now during the recession of the
Can we do
summer
that?
school.
Do we-
So we did go through a competitive process probably around this time last year. So I don't think those quotes are still valid, but if the council is willing for us to re-engage the bidders that proposed then, and perhaps this comes back as a waiver.
That takes too much time.
No, we can come in as no, she's saying we could do it
If
with a
you're-
waiver. We
right.
don't have to go through the whole process.
Right.
I think we have to have a process because we're paying for it, right? We're using tax dollars.
But we
to-
already did.
Well, but she's saying that
use that
if we
process.
waive
But I
the
think
bidding
that-
process, we're
right.
using the other ones. I think that seems to
Okay,
me.
so the motion means that also implies to waive the so I'll
It
make
may
that.
be the case. We may be able
Well,
to.
let's give you the broadest, you're running the city,
Right.
not us. Okay, so the addition to my motion is to add the waiver power to the village manager with the purpose and the policy clearly that we want to compensate them for something great that they did for us in an emergency, period.
May I ask through the chair, might it be easier if you do, would you rather do the work?
And then have us reimburse you?
Or we can, that we can have some sort of agreement in place and that, I don't know if that's easier for
Tell me,
you.
Michelle, which is easier for you guys?
I think also, which are you more comfortable with?
Like Shark Tank.
Why don't you think about it?
I think that will be the solution in order to do it and engage and select the contractor from even the bidders that we have.
Okay.
Because we did it a very comprehensive bidding, so I think that
Then
we
let's-
can choose and move on and get.
Then let's do
reimbursed.
that. We'll recompense you for your expenditures. Councilmember
That's the
London?
quickest way.
I'd like to suggest is you want to give the manager the power to use her best judgment, whether to use the existing bidders, get new bidders if the bidders are in the right price.
Correct.
And move forward, okay?
And give her the
But
power
don't
to
waive
waive.
anything, just give her the power to go ahead and do it
Can
in
we
the
do
best
that,
way
Chad?
possible.
I think you can do it. I would just say that under the rules, in order, because it's not on the agenda and it was added, just you have to make a finding that this is a time-sensitive matter. And
Well, I
I think
think
you guys
clearly
have
it is.
explained why, I'm just saying. But I
Absolutely.
think
So for the
we can do it.
record, because
I'm
this
making it
is
your motion.
something that needs to be done during the summer recess of school, we need to take action on this tonight.
We can add that in
By the way,
motion.
for the
No problem
record,
getting
Shh, guys,
bids and going
I don't
about
need
it.
5 people talking. Councilmember
no,
Laredo?
for the record and for our communication skills with our taxpayers, this process will probably save us money.
Probably. Councilmember London, anything to add? Okay, go back to Sid.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
Call the roll.
Take the vote.
I'm sorry, what is the motion?
The motion is you have the discretion, determine the fastest, most efficient way to get their surface, to get the parking lot
That's the
resurfaced
most economical
and
way.
and the drains cleaned.
Because of time sensitivity.
Because it's a
make it part of-
time-sensitive
And
issue.
Before
There
the
are no
school
budgeted
starts.
funds for this, so do we want to take this from fund balance?
Whatever we have to do, we're paying them back for stuff that.
We
Okay,
talked
so the
about
motion would be
120. I put in
authorization not to
120,000 as
exceed
the ceiling.
120,000 from
Correct.
fund balance
Correct.
to restore the parking lot and fix there's one fallen structure.
Right.
that we would
Drains.
repair.
Not to exceed $120,000.
Yes, sir.
No, it's going to be what it costs, that's
Right.
all.
No,
Well, we'll put that, that's fine. Come back to us
Okay.
if there's anything you need more. All those in favor?
All those
Aye.
opposed?
Thank you,
Motion
Council.
carries.
Thank
Next
you.
item,
Thank you.
Ultra, Councilmember Laredo.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Sorry it took so
So
long.
before I go into these things, I just passed this along for your reading. I know that you even today heard me, perhaps you consider it my obsession with misinformation. And we had the FIU is having the fourth Hemisphere Security Conference, which is led by Admiral Fuller, who's the head of the Southern Command. And guess what is one of the top topics in the agenda for security of the United States? Combating misinformation and disinformation. So I share that with you so that you know that I'm not just speaking off the cuff. Well, the good news, I'm going to joke about this because I couldn't believe it. We got a sense that something was happening. There was an obscure announcement in the 20th page, and thanks to a citizen out there somewhere that put out, and I got that there is a scheduled City of Miami Commission, this is interesting, sunshine meeting, and to be done, and not on the dais, but on the staff room. And it was today, and they were supposedly do about bonding and about Ultra. So I said, this doesn't smell right. I asked the manager to show up, and I broke off from my board meeting and the insurance company to go and show up there today. Guess what, folks? Our great friend, because it really is unbelievable, Commissioner Keon Hartman, who you remember did not even allow us to speak when he was chairman at the first presentation, brought up the whole issue of reconsidering Ultra. Even though it was clearly stated that there were never, we were prepared, as you know, to go to that meeting and everything else, and the day before the meeting where their contracts are going to be reviewed, that is Ultra, as a business decision, by letter, said, we're withdrawing. So here you have an elected official now advocating for a private company who supposedly made a business decision not to do it. That's just my comment. So that already is absurd. So all of a sudden, it was supposed to be 2 commissioners, they got 4 commissioners, so they have 4 or 5. And the bottom line is that they decided that this is so important to the economy of Miami, blah, 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 all of what you've heard, that they would like to invite, and one of the commissioners, who's a longtime friend of mine, says, well, I don't like to have this kind of divorce. Maybe they should come and talk to us again, because, I don't like to get divorced and all that kind of stuff. And sure enough, I was there until 4:30, and they passed that they would look to Ultra to see if they would come back. I, as you know, my style, try to speak, and under their rules, very interesting rules, when they have this special, it's sunshine meeting, but it's not a real meeting, so there's no public comment. Notwithstanding that, 3 of those other commissioners allowed me to go to the podium to try to say something, and I can't even pronounce his name. Yeah, because I really think Hartman made some sort of rule and left and adjourned the meeting so that I wouldn't speak. So that's the spirit of, now, that's the bad news, so that I hate to bring you that news. Unfortunately, I was sort of is that it wasn't, in a sense then I've been making calls, that it may not necessarily be at Virginia Key. But in other words, it may be somewhere else in the jurisdiction of Miami. But I just want us to know that happened. I would have done your briefing, but it really happened. And I was there almost at 4:45, and I couldn't believe this thing. And we just need to be alert. It's not at and so they'll have whatever the next meeting is, and we just need to have to plug back in again. I just wanted to let you know that right away. So that's sort of, I don't know if you have any.
Decide anything in the meeting?
Yes, that they all decided, very nebulous, that they would, it was very hard to figure out whether they would invite Ultra to come, because one of them said, this is a terrible divorce. We ought to have a, you know about divorces, right?
I know about it, yeah.
You know, we
Very
should have a
very
reconciliation or something, and maybe we ought to talk. That was such an abrupt letter. Oh my God, what did we do wrong? And so supposedly they're coming back, or they're asking Ultra to come back and discuss about doing it in the city of Miami. The only ray of hope is that it may be somewhere else. But now we have to, like I sent you a little thank you email about the Saturday sessions, and now that we have Ultra behind us, well, it's not quite 100% behind us. So thank you for the manager. Thank you, whoever that citizen was that sent me that email that I caught on and I didn't smell right from the beginning. And sure enough, it's an amazing process, amazing process. We got to be proud of our transparency. But anyway, we still have friends there. Don't panic. But we need to just now be aware. We don't need to do anything right now. That's the unfortunate report on Ultra.
Okay, next item.
Board duties and responsibilities, Councilmember Laredo.
Well, this is just, I already talked about it a little bit before, and I wanted to reiterate, and I'm glad that we took care of the church, Presbyterian Church itself. Here's another example of good-intentioned people speaking on behalf of the council and creating false expectations and false promises. So we have to discipline either by information and education those who are served as on our boards. First of all, that they are an advisory board to the council, to us seven, that they need to be very careful about creating, that does not empower them to be creating a lot of work for staff. We do our own work voluntarily. We don't have offices. We don't have salaries. We don't have secretaries. You know, we do all the reading and all of that on ourselves. And sometimes also disciplines. I heard to make it me more concerned that at the 2040 Vision Committee that you chair, that somebody actually seriously proposed that they be outside of sunshine law, or at least that discussion I got back. And so clearly this is a process that can get out of hand, and again, with no ill intentions, but if we don't discipline by either us as liaisons talking to them directly of the limits of the appointment, and to say, as we say in football, stay on your lanes. You know, we are the ones who make the decisions, whether it's about compromising the money and taxpayers' money, and I'm trying to be, you know, as nice and constructive about it, but I think it's a problem that we need to face. Otherwise, we're going to have other kind of incidents like this. And I mentioned this a little bit, which is particularly sensitive with Kate's committee on land acquisitions, because people could create and invent misinformation, disinformation that, oh, I thought you were making me an offer. This is the only group that can make an offer. That's all I wanted to say on that.
Okay. Anyone want to add? Next item is the other business general discussion.
Yes, motion to grant request for legal reimbursement by former Mayor Myra P. Lindsay.
Basically, for all the reasons I stated before, I make a motion that we authorize the manager to engage the attorney who handled the defense and negotiate to settle that bill.
Negotiate to settle it.
Yeah, I'm not asking to write a check for the amount requested. Empowering her, I asked to empower the manager to analyze the bill for reasonable attorney's fees and costs.
Second.
Yeah, Councilmember Moss
I
and
have,
Councilmember Petros.
From your professional, I mean, have you looked at the time that went into it?
I have not analyzed the bill in depth. I've glanced at it, I believe. I believe there's room for negotiation.
Okay, so the only thing I'm concerned is what we talked about before, reasonable fee. I don't know. I mean, if you put a architect's billing in front of me, I can tell you if it's reasonable or not. I cannot tell in a law bill. So I would push this to our attorneys and our manager to come back and tell us it's not, I don't really mind the hourly rate as much as I do is how many hours does it take in the amount of time and what the issue was that reasonable? And if it is, then fine, but I think we should have that.
Councilmember Petros?
I would like us as a council to make some decisions on this issue and set some boundaries before we request the manager to go and negotiate, because I think there's work that we need to do first before we would give or make a request to the manager in that form. But I don't disagree with you. I just don't think we're quite there yet. And I would like to wait until the next meeting when this information, maybe we need to tell people what we want to see so we can actually act and make a decision on the next meeting.
Councilmember Laredo?
No, thank you. And this is terrible because it doesn't reflect on the claimant, the former mayor. I don't like this process. This is coming in the back door. I pleaded with everybody who listened to me to please, first of all, give me information so I can get educated. And what's the rush? I don't have time. And to this day, I don't have anything. So we can't, so I just second basically to defer without prejudice until the next meeting, until we have the full package that whoever wants us to look at it, we can make a decision on.
Vice Mayor McCormick? No, you were first. You were
Ladies first.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I would also like to wait, and I would like to specifically ask, I personally would like more input from our legal counsel about our position of reimbursement with regard to, I understand our ordinance, I have it, I've read it, but the case law on this, and just to echo Councilmember Laredo, before I can decide that we're going to spend public dollars on something, I really do need to know a lot more.
Councilmember London?
I was informed by Myra that basically this is case law that we really have no choice in reimbursing her. It's been up to the Supreme Court. Is this the case, Chad?
We believe the council has discretion as it relates to investigations. We don't think that it's mandatory on behalf of the council.
Thank you.
Okay, and my only point would be, I think this goes hand in hand with the change in the ordinance.
Yes.
Because my feeling is if we do make the change in the ordinance, I believe I think the ordinance when enacted didn't go broad enough in my estimation. That's how I feel about this. But I think that's the appropriate step. To Council Members Laredo's and the Vice Mayor's points, I think we need to be as broad and transparent about this as we can be. And I feel, the announcement that this was coming as a discussion item and then was moved to other business general discussion. I want this to be fully vetted so that we do this. I mean, I sympathize with the former mayor's position. I do, because I think, she went out of pocket on something that at the end of the day, there was nothing found. They went no further. They basically dismissed it or whatever the heck they did, and I wanted clarification on that. I've read the report, I've read the decision, but anyway, no negative finding, I guess is the safest thing to say. No negative action. No action. But at the same time, I want to do this properly. I want to do this transparently so that everybody understands why we're doing this and that we're not just, because she's a friend, we're not just doing this for her. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way I feel. So I would ask that you bring back the information on the next meeting and we get it done.
The former mayor had requested to do a special presentation for the council on the case law. I believe she made a request for this meeting, which wasn't granted. Is that granted for the next meeting, if she so desires?
I mean, is that a...
So we were just talking about that. So procedurally, I think Saturday we made some good progress on kind of how things are going to flow through to decision making. So Chad and I were just saying maybe a resolution with the backup of what you're looking for, all the backup.
Perfect. I think as long as it's public, as long as it's going out to every, the case law and everything explaining what this is, will make it
in writing, just like we
so
do.
that everybody
and the opinion that you have with the backup would be helpful.
Well,
there could be an attorney's memo as a cover with the reso, all the backup there.
I think that's
That's all we need is the facts. And the
But can we
law.
allow her to have her special presentation? I think
If she,
that's,
yeah,
I think that's
that's not a
fair.
problem.
So let's put
Absolutely,
that on
that's
the
fair.
agenda. Do we agree?
I think you can have her speak when the resolution comes.
Okay.
However
However
you
you want
welcome
to
to
frame
come
it.
and speak ever. It's a public meeting.
Councilmember London?
One more thing, since we are
So
considering
wait, to make sure
changing
withdraw
our ethics or our legal defense of public officials, should we wait till we decide what we're going to do for people going forward and treat her the same way?
Yes, that's, I kind of, that's kind of the way I feel.
So
That's what the
maybe
mayor was
we
saying.
should do that first, and then she would come under that, whatever we do then.
Right, I mean, well, I think then at that point, frankly, it's a done deal, because if we, assuming we go with the law as broad as we're going to do,
If you're waiting for a new ordinance, you're talking about a process that's going to take well until the fall.
why? It's two meetings.
Well, we only have
Yeah,
this one in
we
August.
break for summer. We have the next meeting, that's it.
I thought we had do we have the 11th and the?
No, 11th, and then it's a hearing.
The 18th
25th?
and the
No, 25th
27th.
is here, and it's 18th.
11th and the budget workshop, the 18th, then August 27th.
All right, well, I don't want her to wait until the fall.
So
You can put it on
that's,
the June agenda.
Yeah, put it on the, yeah.
that's,
Well,
We could do a special meeting.
Well, budget meeting, first.
Can we
Special
make a
meeting between
decision in the
budget meeting.
spirit once we
Right,
vetted
exactly.
this?
I think that's the right way. Once we make a determination as to how we're going to proceed with the ordinance, I have no problem with, I don't want to have to wait beyond the discussion.
agreed.
But let's have a strong ordinance coming in next meeting.
Then we can do the youth
Okay.
council
Okay with you?
in the same meeting.
Yes, perfect. Motion to adjourn?
No, discussion.
Second.
Second.